So I know you guys are doing, some of you guys are doing the hackathon this weekend, so I thought if there was anything that you guys thought was like, wow, I really want to do this for my hackathon project, but I'm not sure how, I thought we could interrupt the regular flow of the class and we could work on that stuff because it might be interesting to other people. And if nothing comes up, then I have a perfectly awesome class that will be interesting to everyone that we can go ahead and continue on. So let's take 5 minutes and just kind of think and Google for a second, and then at 6:10 we'll come back together and we'll decide if there's something really awesome that we should all work on because it's going to be really awesome for our hackathon projects, or multiple things that are awesome, or if we should just do regular class, which will still be really great and uniquely satisfying. So. Okay, anybody thought anything? Otherwise we'll go to just regular class. So Joe, you got any ideas? No? Hank and crew? You guys have any?
I'm working on a data visualization thing. My brother was really interested in making a zero history chat client that would just stream information back and forth without ever storing it anywhere.
Okay, that's be an interesting idea. Anybody else over here?
Storing web pages with jQuery and
crawling stuff.
Crawling stuff, and then being able to search stuff for all.
And searching it. Okay, that's an interesting idea. Steve, you got anything? No. TJ? No? Okay, cool. All right, so the zero history thing, that's actually that's actually not a bad thing we could talk about. There's this thing called Pusher, which I use all the time, which is actually great for stuff like hackathons. Pusher is a as a service version of something which you can run without paying for anything, called WebSockets. WebSockets are a way that you can network together different browsers and get them to communicate without so through a server, through a common server. So the difference between regular old HTTP and something like what you have on your phone is in HTTP, as a client, you need to initiate the request. So there are lots of different ways that you can simulate the idea versus the opposite being actually pushing people messages. So you can simulate having messages pushed to you through a process called polling, where you just go and you just say, are there any messages, are there messages, are there messages? And that's a totally fine approach. For example, every once in a while you see Gmail going and polling for your messages. When you're sitting on Gmail, every once in a while it's oh, refreshing, and it goes and refreshes itself. The chat in Gmail is actually a WebSocket. WebSocket is constantly open and being connected to some server somewhere, and it's able to hold open connections to thousands, if not tens of thousands of clients at the same time, because the connections are very lightweight. They're not doing a lot of processing. They're essentially just a handle to Rafi, to Hank, and to Ian, and to all the people. And then when there's a message that needs to be sent, the server can mediate it. Running those servers yourself can be pretty tricky, and honestly is, I think, generally a waste of time. You're much better off just using somebody else's implementation. Pusher is a really cool library. You can use it from both Ruby and from JavaScript, and you can use it to do kind of like pretty cool things, because it'll help you to like display real-time information to your users and stuff like that. So we could definitely do that today. That could be a lot of fun, and it might make its way into some of your hackathon projects. I don't know if that would be the case. The other thing that I wanted to do that was kind of like, this was kind of like my sort of like class ideas. I thought that I think that a lot of people were maybe not quite at the create users and sign in as users type of stuff. I know that you've got users going pretty well in your product. The rest of us, do you guys have users, and can you sign in as users? You got your users. You don't have users, Joe. What about you guys? Users?
I set it up last.
Can you like sign in as the user and like make sure the password works and stuff like that?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So that's good. So being able to implement the user model, making sure that's there, and then like forgot password is kind of like, it's not a exciting hackathon feature, but it is a very practical real world feature. So if that's something that you guys want to do, there's this like active support message verifier that we mentioned actually at the end of last class, and I don't think anybody actually got going. But we could that would dovetail better with what we did last time in terms of like mailers and using mailers in order to send messages from your Rails app. If you think about it, sending messages with mailer is kind of like the whole thing with Pusher, except it's a little bit less exciting, right? Because it just ends up in your email box. Pusher will end up in your browser if you're like logged into that. So, what are people's interest in all of those different topics? Because we kind of talked about any of them. What's JavaScript stuff? So the Pusher stuff definitely involves JavaScript stuff. So we could just kind of do like a little class today on JavaScript and some basic JavaScript techniques. I think that would actually be pretty interesting. And then that'll help you guys, I think, in some of your hackathon efforts. And so what I'll do is I'll live program here for like maybe like half an hour. I'll just show you some stuff, and then we can kind of like break up and you guys can try to reproduce the stuff that I made. I don't have like a lecture or anything. Like Paul might add one, but like I said, I think this would be more fun if we kind of like do something like that's like more geared towards like your hackathon stuff, and then we'll get back on like the real like lecture train next week. Cool. All right. So, you guys see this okay? All right, cool. So what I'm going to do is I am going to make some stuff here in my beta store app. So a couple things that I was playing with. Okay, so if you're going to this hackathon, it's always a good look to read. Like obviously, like the internet is very self-documenting. So it's always good to kind of read about these little hackathon tips. A lot of them are pretty much the same thing. I've won a bunch of hackathons before, and I would tell you that there really is like, it's kind of not that hard, but not everybody knows the tricks. Like the number one trick is to tell a really good story the whole time. Like that's more important than your whole product. And then the side by side to that is when you're telling your story, it'd be great if your demo worked. Like that's the whole point. So like having a nice compelling story is super important. This evaluate hackathon sponsors, that's also really important because they're especially if you want to win, like the sponsors will come with like something like an API or some piece of thing that they want you guys to use as like hackathon participants. And if you go and use that, you'll probably win because nobody else is going to use it. Like nobody else knows that for some reason. So if there's like a sponsored API, you should definitely consider using it. It's a totally good idea. This deploying early, that's totally like that's the way that we've done this class to date is to deploy all the time with Heroku. So that means you should be checking into Git every hour. That means every time you check into Git, at least every other time you check into Git, you should be pushing to Heroku and making sure it still works. And that helps you with that later on part, which is like your demo needs to work. That's super important. Rebuild your app afterwards, that's kind of obvious. I think this is a reasonably good tip. Don't scaffold your application. I don't know if Paul's really showed you guys the Rails scaffolding stuff to a large degree. That definitely helps you like show off Rails really fast, but it doesn't necessarily help you to say get anything done, I think, in general. So I think that's a pretty good tip. Something else that I kind of noticed in here that I thought was pretty good. Yeah, like this show don't tell. It's kind of what I was talking about here. Deploy early and often. See the same tips. Everybody's got the same tips. This is having a layered strategy. This is another really, really good idea. Like, you guys know now that you've been doing some programming in this class that some stuff is a lot harder than it seems. Like, it just is. So when you think about like your product that you want to have at the end of, if it's going to be this hackathon at the end of Sunday, think about it like as a whole thing, and then also try to think about it as different layers. So that even if you got just the very first part of it done, then you'd have something to present, and it would be deployed. It'd be out there on the web. So that's a good tip. And then, I don't know, this other sort of stuff is covered. It's the same thing. Use Git for version control. That's like obvious. Get to know vendors and sponsors. We've talked about that. The other thing that I was going to show you guys, almost everybody's going to be using Bootstrap. Just because, like, if you do software, because everyone loves Bootstrap, this Boot Swatch is like a pretty good resource. It gives you like some different colors and stuff. So I mean, if you don't want to use Bootstrap, by all means use something else. You get a huge benefit from using some kind of CSS framework, because at least it'll have a look. So like, I would say don't use vanilla Bootstrap, and if at all possible, get like one of these big pictures for the background, because then it gives it a look, right? So that would be like a little tip too. So get one of these big pictures. Get like one of these things here, and like all you basically do is I did this before class just like to show you guys how easy it is. If your example is like this boot swatch, which is like they're all a little different here. All you do is you take this link and you just want to go and wget it right into your vendor directory. So or just download. In the event that you can't wget it, just open up vendor, vendor assets, style sheets, and then just go ahead and save this right into here. And that will make it so that you've got a, it's funny because I just did that and I don't see it in there. Vendor assets, style sheets. Oh, you know what I did? I put it into JavaScript, but you know what? Rails doesn't care. Rails doesn't care about that. Actually, it doesn't really matter, it turns out, but I'll put it in style sheets. So I put it in style sheets, and then if you name it something that Rails can understand, or that Rails can reference, it actually doesn't really matter what you name it, but I named it like the name of this theme. Then all you do is you just want to go and suck it into your application CSS right here. Did you guys cover vendor assets before? This is a new concept?
Yes.
Okay. Let's do one of these actually, because vendor assets are a very important part about like JavaScript and other stuff that you might need. So I think like for example in your guys' app you guys have a little like a jQuery plugin of some sort, like it's like a calendar plugin, or I guess stylized, right? Selectize? Selectize. Okay, so like, let's go get like a jQuery plugin out here. Maybe there's like a top jQuery plugins. So yeah, jQuery top plugins. 24 best plugins. All right, so the way that I would do this is I would make this a little bit more like, I need this, but just because this will be a little bit of a contrived example, let's go ahead and just get one that is totally contrived. So Tool Tipster, this seems like a great plugin, enabling you to easily create semantic tooltips. So like an example of this? Okay, here's one. All right, so like, whoa, look at that. That's really cool. See, like there's this little thing. When you hover over this thing, you're gonna get like all kinds of neat things in here that you potentially would want in your app. Cool. All right, so everybody pull up Tool Tipster. We can just do this like side by side here. I'll just show you how easy it is. So you want to go to Tool Tipster, just like Google it and get this up here. It's like either this website or if you just Google, I'm sure. Wow. Everybody's kind of there. All right, so now we just want to go to download here. All right, and then this is going to give us, this is on GitHub, so if you like went to star, this will pull up the GitHub thing, and like basically what we should get here is, in this case, this is like a tarball of master. So inside of here is going to be, I usually take this and I'll open it up in Sublime so that I can, or Atom, which is you guys are using Atom, and just see what's in here. Sure enough, there's Tool Tipster, there's the unminified version, and then there's the minified version. It's not going to matter actually which one you use. I'll probably just use the unminified one because it's easier to read. So you just want to go ahead and find that in Finder, and then take this, and then go get your assets, your vendor assets directory, and just paste it right in there. So I'm going to do the same thing. So take this here, and move it in there. Trying to use paste, but it is not interested. All right, cool. So it's as easy as that.
So you want to take the JS file and put
Yeah, it's going to be in. Sorry, let me explain that more clearly. So this is your Rails, your basic file structure. Right? At the bottom here is this really cool folder called vendor. Vendor is for stuff that's not yours. So the vendor being somebody else. Somebody else is the vendor. App is for you, and it turns out all the other folders are really for you. But vendor is a good place to keep things that are not yours, and that way you know that they're not yours, and you shouldn't really go change it. Because if you go change, for example, tooltipster, then like some other version could come up and like it can screw it all up. So you're better off for things that are not yours, keeping them in vendor. So vendor, assets, JavaScripts. So anything inside of assets will actually get loaded automatically for you into the asset pipeline, which we've talked about before. So by putting tooltipster into vendor assets JavaScripts, now you'll have access to this tooltipster library inside your app.
What's the min?
The min is the minified version. It's a great question. So if you look at the let's see, what's the easiest way for me to show you this? Well, you can actually look at this. So if you go to in the GitHub repo, if you go to JS, and then you go to, I'm going to open these both up separately here. One in, and then you go click on the raw file here. Okay. And okay, so this file versus this file. So I've got the tool tipster regular versus min. You go to inspect element and then click on the network tab. The network tab will tell you all kinds of information about how requests happen inside your browser. It's a place that I go every single day, and it's a great place for you to go to. If you hit refresh on each of these, you'll get the file size. So you'll notice that in the basic tool tipster without the min, it's 12K, and in the minified version, it's 5.5K. And what's happening there is that there's a process called JavaScript minification where you take a JavaScript file and you try to reduce the number of characters in it so that the download weight is less. And so the minified versions they'll give you better asset performance, but in the case of like development, or in the case of Rails actually, it doesn't really matter because Rails has its own minification strategy. So this is really like more appropriate to like be very concerned about if you have like a WordPress site or something and you're like drag this asset in and just try to link it in. But Rails has its own asset minification that's part of the asset pipeline. So I never use the minified version because I expect Rails to just take care of it for me. So, and also here we're saving 5K. So 5K is a very, very small amount of file size. So that's why we choose a particular kind of tools tipster. So at this point, hopefully what you've got is you've got the tooltipster JS file here in your vendor directory. And then what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to like use this somewhere in your application. So hopefully you've got like a home page somewhere, and this can just this is the kind of thing that this is kind of like a little hack here. So if you guys are working on your beta store project and you have it in a place that you really like, you can jump on a branch or just not commit all this stuff. Like this is just going to be kind of like for fun. But I feel like it'd be fun to kind of go along here. I'll show you kind of how my process is like using these things. So if we go to getting started thing, it's going to say, okay, like link in some different things. I want you to download it. I want you to link in the CSS. All right, so this is a good suggestion here. So we said, oh, okay, we've got the tooltipster JavaScript file, but we also want the CSS in. So let's go ahead and link that in. We're going to follow the same process. Go to the CSS folder and pull in tooltipster as well, and put that into style sheets and assets. So here, this folder down here, this is my what I downloaded from the website, the tooltipster website, and I'm just going to drag this right into style sheets. So now I've got tooltipster in here, tooltipster.css, and tooltipster JS here too. So does that kind of make sense? Everyone following that?
So tooltipster.css and style sheets.
Yeah, in style sheets. Yeah. Okay. So at this point, putting them into by putting that into your vendor directory, you'll be able to include it into your application CSS and application JS and have that thing loaded up for you. Anything in vendor, you can just require just through the name without the extension. So here I'm in application CSS. I'm going to blow this up so you guys can see a little better. This editor is slightly different than the editor you have, but it's essentially the exact same thing. So application CSS. So I'm gonna add a new require line. Depending on what's in your application CSS, I usually require all the vendor stuff first. That way I have the chance to overwrite it if I want to. So I'm just going to include tool tipster here. Good question. Yeah.
It's just hard to see. It's really small on the side.
Oh, on the side here. Yeah. So in vendor, let me go ahead and zoom in here. So yeah, it's you can hold the control button and scroll. I'll let you do that. So in vendor, you should have tool tipster JS and you should have tool tipster CSS. The CSS one is style sheets and the JS one is JavaScript.
I got that stuff now. Next step would be
And then the next step is, yeah, so the next step is in your application JS and CSS files, we're going to go ahead and, so, okay, sorry, I jumped ahead there. Let me explain again. The goal here is that we download this tool tipster library because we want to use it in our hackathon project. We think it's going to make us win. So now, the first thing we do is put in the vendor directory so that we'll have access to it. And then we want to include it on our page so that we can actually like wire up the tooltip. So the way that we include it on the page is we go ahead and make a new require in each of the application CSS and application JavaScript. So here in application CSS, I'm setting require tool tipster. And then in application JavaScript, I am going to require it. The syntax is going to be a little different because this is JavaScript comments are different. I'm going to require it, and it turns out this is named differently. It's named jQuery.tooltipster, so that's what I'm going to call it here. It's just the name of it in the file. So the file here is actually called jQuery.tooltipster. And the reason it's called jQuery.tooltipster is because it's a jQuery plugin. And jQuery plugins tend to be prefixed with jQuery dot in order so that you know that if you don't have jQuery, it's not going to work. So now we've got those two things. We following along?
just go back to the CSS file.
Sure.
Okay, so it's close.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it's a quote or not. I tend to quote those. I don't know if that's actually required. All right, so now what we should see is if you pull up your project. My project is much simpler than yours because I just started for today's class. But if you go to your home page and then you refresh it and then you go to view page source in development mode, you can see all of your assets, which is super helpful. Actually, I'll just use this thing. It's a little faster. And they'll all get listed out. So what I did is I just did view page source, which is right here in Chrome. It's in this menu here. And you can see it, my tooltipster.css got loaded in here, and my tooltipster, jQuery.tooltipster also got loaded in there. So that means it's success. And I'll just go ahead and you can click them and make sure that they're in there. So there's JavaScript, there's CSS. Does everyone have that?
It's in the page source.
Yeah, view page source. That's just to verify that you've got your things linked in the way you think they do. So mileage will vary. You have different stuff in your layout. I have a very, very simplified layout here, just because I want to focus on the new stuff. But so you'll have a little different things.
Not seeing.
So you put your So if you're not seeing them in this list here, you want to make sure that they're required correctly in the application JS application CSS, and then just give it a refresh. They should show. And Hank, if you're not seeing it, I will come over and take a quick look for you. Is everybody else kind of seeing that or following along? Yep.
It's in
Okay.
it's required to oh, right, that's the wrong thing. That's why. I'm
Okay. No big deal. All right, cool. So I'll let you guys kind of clean that up. In the meantime, let's go ahead and learn how to use that tooltipster library because it was listed in the 21 best jQuery plugins, so it must be a really good one. In fact, it was number 4. So the idea here, they said go ahead and download it and load these things up. So the suggestions they have here is this is kind of like, again, for more like traditional like non-dynamic websites. So here they're wanting you to link them in, but since you guys have this really cool dynamic website that has asset packaging and stuff, you follow the steps that we just followed. And then what they wanted you to do is they want to just go ahead and say, okay, if you add a, it seems like this particular library is very, very easy to do. So we'll just follow this exact example. We don't have an image, so let's just go ahead and link in this. Let's put this link on our page. And so we'll put that right here. I have a this single page at the root of my file. So just do something like that. You got it? You got it, Hank? Nice. So we'll add that link right from the getting started here on the tooltips for thing, and then it says you have to activate it with document ready. So that's going to be the kind of the important trick here. So have you guys covered jQuery at all yet? No? Okay. That's okay. We can cover a lot of that stuff today, and there's not a ton to it, luckily. So we've got JavaScript here, so we're going to follow this exactly. So, and then we'll worry about exactly what this is in 1 second. So I'm going to go ahead and paste this in. It says, I got to turn on my scroll past end. Okay, so this says, I just took this right from here. I'm going to put it right in the bottom of my application JS file. So it says, basically what this is saying is, when your web page is fully loaded, then go ahead and find an element that has a class of tooltip, and then call the function tooltipster on it, which will essentially set the plugin in motion. So we just need to make sure that this has that class. It does, so we're in good shape. And so now if we go back to here, and we hit save. So funny. There's my link. And the only reason I can't see it is because what? All right. Okay, so I can't see that either, so I don't know what's up. So maybe tooltipster is taking off the page by accident? No. Maybe my HTML is not valid? Could be. Let's see what Chrome thinks. Chrome thinks I've got a body, thinks I've got this link in here. So small. Oh look, there's my tooltip message. Oh, you guys can't see that quite. You can't quite see that. So yeah, so if I roll over this thing, it says here's my tooltip message, which is good. But the link itself, it seems like it's hidden, which is probably the style that they want, I suppose. So this is yeah, okay. So there's my tooltip message. But I can't see the link, as I'm sure you have noticed. And why is that? I think that that's because let's see. Let's see what we got here. Here's an A tag. There's a color. I just can't see this guy. Probably because he's displayed off page, I guess. So, all right. So, are you guys seeing the kind of tooltip thing in yours? Can you link it in and get the fire, get to show up on the page? So I have them like right below here. I can't even actually see the base link, which is, like I said, it's kind of a bummer. So let me see if I can figure that out real quick. And then this should actually. Oh, he's just got it pulled up. Okay. So that makes sense. So the tooltip library. So here's my link actually. But the tooltip library, one of the things that I got pulled in was that CSS, and it will actually hide the things that are the target of your tooltip. So what I noticed there, let me zoom in so I can show you exactly how we kind of debug that, because I think this is relevant. Okay, so what I saw was I saw the tooltip showing up, but I was surprised that there wasn't the word link on the page, because in the HTML there clearly is the word link. So I went down into, shut that maybe, is that possible? So I went down into This is very much like a totally standard like thing that happens all the time in software. Is like things are not happening the way you want it there. So I went down into the element section. I can see the A tag on the page, which is great. It says the word link. And so then I went over into the style section to try to debug it even further. So I noticed initially, let me put these together so you can see a little better. So what I'm seeing here is this style section. This is showing you all the applied CSS for a particular element. And so you can use this to debug your own code or to try to understand how other people's code works as well. So here I'm clicking on whatever I click on in the document tree. It's going to show me the styles being applied to it. So if your website is more complicated than mine, which probably is your beta store, then you're going to see other styles all like using the CSS cascade. So you can see like for this H1, there are some default styles, and then for all the different headers, H1 through H6. And then as we kind of move up the cascade, then it gets more and more specific. So the font size gets applied specifically for H1s. When I looked at this A tag, which is the A tag I copied out of the example, I noticed that the tooltip class, since I called this tooltip, it's going ahead and applying a whole bunch of stuff for me. And that's all coming from, let me scroll over here. That's all coming from it's all coming from from one of my from one of my assets actually. It looks like it's coming from a conflict between that like cute little readability bootstrap thing I was telling you about before and something else. So let me go ahead and pull that off because you're not going to have that same problem. Let me go ahead and do this. That's a little confusing. Because probably the readability bootstrap, it thought that tooltip should be hidden for whatever reason. So this link here, so like to kind of go back to where we were. So here's the link. The tooltip gets fired right away, and that's all getting fired because of the code that we ran in the application.js file. This bit of code right here. So if we comment this out, it should be the case that I don't get a fancy tooltip. I'll just get the standard system tooltip, which is for OS X Yosemite is just kind of like gray box, but it's definitely not that fancy black overlay box like this kind of thing here. So is everybody seeing that black overlay box now? Yeah? No? You're stuck? Your link is they're there, but they're not there? Alright, well, let's get. So I think what's happening, so the way you configure this particular plugin, so it's probably the title of the link is going to be what's in the message. So if there's no title specified, it won't be in the message. And if you go back to the documentation, it's going to talk about exactly how this works. So a lot of these plugins, you can parameterize them by passing in different options here. So here you can pass in a different content option, and that's what will end up in that thing, in that little black box. So this options section, almost every jQuery plugin will have one of these option sections where it explains all the different ways that you can configure it, and there are dozens of options here. So, but you can change the content here by setting the content option, and that will go ahead and change how this is displayed. So I think what I'll do at this point is I want to talk a little bit about jQuery and why this plugin kind of works the way it is. But before I do that, TJ, you're good. You got your tooltip going on. Steve, what about you? Are you following along? You got the tooltip kind of working? It's kind of working.
It's working.
You got it. You guys got it. Okay. You can't see yours. All right. All right. So if for a moment, why don't you guys just take a peek at these options and see if you can try to apply another one of them. This debug boolean, if you set the debug to true, the way you'll want to do that is inside of these little parens here, you create a new jQuery or JavaScript hash, and you just want to say like debug true. That'll give you that option, the option to debug it. And what that'll do is it should give you some additional logging, I bet. Actually, I didn't see any additional. So let's try one of these other options. Okay, so here's the position. So the default is top, which means that this go up to the top here. But if you try one of these other positions, like try bottom, then you should see it going to a direction. So this is a bottom, and then now mine goes to the bottom. So that would be the kind of idea. So try some of those options and kind of experiment with how that sort of works. Let me. All right, I believe that. All here too. All right, so we got here B. So I back to the source code. Let's take. So you've got this link too here. So the only issue that well, so that's actually the system. So it's only great. And probably because so Bootstrap turns these toolkits because I guess there's probably a Bootstrap toolkit that's built in. So let's use a different class. If you guys aren't seeing your tooltip, it's because you guys are all using Bootstrap just like I was, and Bootstrap hides things with a class of tooltip. So let's use a different tooltip or different class to target this element. So in whatever you're applying your tooltip to, let's apply let's say just call it show tooltip. So this class is going to be show-tooltip. And what that should do is, so I'll turn back on my Bootstrap since it's the same as yours actually. So now in order to, so if I leave this JavaScript alone and I come back here, then I'm only going to see the system tooltip, the gray box, or I think it's a yellow box if you're not on Yosemite yet. But if I change this to say show tooltip in the JavaScript here, then I'll go back to having the nice black fancy style tooltip. So now you got it. So because you're seeing the system tooltip, and that's because you didn't have the JavaScript. So you wanna bring in that JavaScript and put that into your application. That's gonna be there. So then just change the selector to say we show tooltip on 20. Yeah, that's gonna show that. Yeah, and then make sure you save it, and then you go back there. That's on. Cool. All right, what do you got on?
So,
Find file, Angular, text. So is that getting linked into one of your part files, like the application.js or stuff? I'll actually tell you. So if you go back here. Yeah, so maybe you just got an extra purple. So I'm just going to try that. Alright, cool. So that's looking good. So yeah, so that's a really good point. Is like the way that particular plugin works is that it expects you to initialize them all. So if you wanted to use this special tooltip plugin, then what I'd say is that you would generally apply a class to all things that you want to have a special plugin. So like show tooltip is kind of not about name. You just every single thing you want to have in the class, you want to have a design you want some class. I would probably use a different. I would try to use so that generic example where it was just the class was just called tooltip. You can see that already causes a conflict with like the Bootstrap stuff. So it's better to have a more specific target. That way you don't accidentally have a conflict with something else. So I usually make these kind of domain specific. So I might call that like if I had a link there, I would call this like link tooltip or even like more specifically like this is a contrived example, but if that was a link to like a product. I might say like product link tooltip, and that way you can interpret it correctly. You get the comment.
Yeah, I was curious about when you actually brought this in on applications.
No, you just want to put that in the already. Since that's already JavaScript, you just don't need to script that. Oh, it's good. So that's going to be, so that you're just going to want like the activate code. So we pay the script tags, that's up there. And we're going to walk through the code and just, you don't need the script tags. You need the script tags. That's for if you're recommending it. And then you want to just kind of have something on your page to activate with the tooltips. In one home page, for example, you create a new link, or if you have a list of products or something like that, then you create a tooltip.
So I'll do that. That's actually
Yeah, so that's the system tooltip.
let's
And
get
then
it.
if you get the your application JS file, so you need to kind of activate. So you go into app assets application. That's pretty good. So then is this class? So this class here, that string there, that's gonna go try to find the element page. So just saying that's what that would show. You're gonna show. But you need the dot, right? The dot here, right? Yeah, so the dot is good as that's confusing. So it's going to show shadow, and then if you go to and then start. So I just maybe what you do is you can start calling on your thing. All right. So you've got your thing. You go to
So you said it last.
great. And then this is like the one function. So just like on this application JS and then so this is saying this is no function. So that must mean your application you have.
So tool control highlighted, which is value. Well, the tool is going out, but it doesn't look like it's being affected. Yeah, it's not good.
So you need the application CSS or the CSS.
Which I thought was your better assets like the tooltips about CSS. jQuery, JS, and then you go to assets and then you make it from there, right?
So should have everybody knows how to use this jQuery. Here's this coming in. happening is
You
with loading jQuery, it's getting rid of that. So probably what's happening is
Maybe it's because I'm including after the jQuery or before the jQuery. Because jQuery, it needs to be working. So let's see what happens.
So what you can do is you can say this is how you initiate it. So
Oh, the tooltip itself.
here it is. There's a razor.
That's what I thought.
Here's all these.
So it's the jQuery.
Let's
go with the curve.
Because you don't actually need that.
Hungry beggar.
So we're probably an application
So,
you already kind of cover your pieces here by putting it in your application CSS and JS. So you just get rid of those three lines. So what you do, that was a tough problem to solve. The thing that's happening is that since you go to jQuery, then you load it into tooltoaster, and then what happens is by having jQuery file, jQuery load line again, that jQuery has code whatever, you're actually redefining the $sign operator again without tooltoaster. So it's like you're starting. Right. But so now that yeah, exactly. That load order is the application JS and application CSS. That list helps you control load order very exactly. Like, that's kind of why it's What did you do? Did you get your thing load order?
So now it goes tile.
Yeah. So you got that. Yes, actually, so I'm hoping that too. So like you don't actually need. It's a little confusing, but you don't need to actually put that script tag in there. You would just put it into your application.
There's like a format mention.
JS.
I'm interested in that.
Yeah. Then you don't need the script tag. The script tag is
Style is entirely that's nice to have.
and then probably we should have already made the box to show you. Yeah, so then back in that file, you're going to have your class on then 22. That needs to have these show and then here it's about destination. That's the system tooltip. So then your console, so you go to your console.
So that's what it does is
Because the load order is a role. It's a setting of the order. So I can go back to your application and move that line below.
probably just be similar to how this method has been applied to just be so it's called we talk about it. It's called method chaining. It's pretty I'll take from
Okay, cool. So, alright, so that's like, alright, so everybody's got the tooltip thing now, which is great. So, what I wanted to show, so, like, that sort of is actually not the worst demo in the world. Like, here we just pick some random plugin, and, like, we all ran into some, like, little issues with it. But hopefully what we saw is, like, there are kind of ways to work through it. So I think that, like, the issues that I saw, I'll just kind of, like, recap them for everybody, since not everybody had an issue. Like, what was your name in the back again? I'm sorry. Damien, right? So, like, Damien had probably the most confusing issue. He got everything all loaded in the right place. He had the stuff in the vendor thing. He had the application .js stuff all right. He had the classes matching up. And then what he was getting is in the console here, which is a great place to look for like problems, which is in the bottom here. So if I just say throw something. Okay, so that'll show up in the console, if that's the right language. It'll show up in here as red. Okay, actually here it's already, I actually have it set to break on exceptions, so, which you may not have. So I'll get this like uncaught, whatever. So this console, and you see you always get this little, this nice little indicator that says one error. So even if you're in some other element, this little indicator here will show you that there's an error. So what Damien had was, it said he got a very classic JavaScript error, which is undefined is not a function, which means that's kind of the opposite of like a nil reference error. So you're calling a function that you think is defined, but it's actually not. So if you like in Ruby, if you were to say like have a string and you were to call, say, let's see, I can't think of a method that's not a string. Where, like there's a where method that's defined on active record models, like so you can say like users where email is so and so. But if you try to call where on a string, that's not a method. And what Ruby will say is there's no method where on string, but JavaScript has a little bit weaker error syntax. So you get this undefined is not a function, which is confusing sometimes because you're like, why can't you just tell me what is not a function? But that's just not the way JavaScript works, unfortunately. So undefined is not a function means that you think that you're calling a valid function, but in fact you're not. And what David's issue was that he had the jQuery getting loaded first, and then he had tooltipster getting loaded, and then jQuery was getting loaded again, which was essentially nullifying the whole effort that you made to load tooltipster in the first place. So natively there is no function called tooltipster on jQuery, but getting loaded or correct, it creates a function called tooltipster, but then you can wipe it out again by reloading jQuery. And that's just like a special like little JavaScript issue, which we can talk a little bit more about. The other issues that I saw some people with the wrong class names in the jQuery selector, which makes sense because we haven't really covered that yet. And I also saw some stuff with some other like load order issues where just people didn't have things loaded quite the right way. So I think what we should actually do next is talk a little bit about JavaScript and jQuery. I noticed that everybody's application.js file was totally empty, which is no big deal. It just means that you guys haven't covered it yet. So let's talk a little bit about jQuery. So and JavaScript, they kind of go one in the same. I think, but like generally speaking, JavaScript is a language and jQuery is a plugin, which is very, very prolific, so that you see a lot of jQuery on the web. If you just go into your application JS file for a second, we can do a little bit of live programming here that's kind of interesting. So the basic kind of like mechanism of JavaScript is console log. So just like when you use puts in Ruby, you've got console log in JavaScript. We're going to say hello here, hi world. That's going to come up in my console, right? That's easy. There's also a couple different settings here you can see. So you can use warn. That'll make it like yellow, or info will make it a different color too. That's all just kind of like little like gotchas. So let's see, little helpful things. The next thing that you've got inside of here, JavaScript represents objects a lot like in kind of an interesting way compared to Ruby. JavaScript is also completely dynamic, which means you can just create any object and move it around any way you want to. It doesn't care about types or anything like that. Hashes and objects are kind of the same thing in JavaScript. So here I have a hash, like A1, B, it doesn't matter what the keys are. So here I have this thing called D. It's going to have a key of A and a key of B. So back in the browser, where that is, I'll go back here. I should have an object called D. And if you notice, it says, zoom in here. If you notice, it says D, and then it has this object syntax, and then it shows the keys and their values. So just like in Ruby, you can index a hash by the key in quotes. So that'll give me 1. This will give me 1. This will give me nothing because it's not Ruby. You can't use symbols. But different than Ruby, which is kind of cool, is you can also index it with just a dot operator. So here, I'm indexing it like a property, but it's but it's actually like it's actually part of this hash. So you wouldn't really be able to do that in Ruby. That's just not how hashes work in Ruby. But it is the way it works in JavaScript, which is cool. Another thing that I use a lot, especially if I have a hash, is this console.table. If you call that, it gives you. Oh, it's actually for a set of objects. So it'll take all the little properties and it'll break them all out. So if I had an array of objects, this is a good way to kind of look at their properties, which we'll have pretty shortly. So the next thing I wanted to show you is that actually you don't really even have to go to your own website, because there's this one of the things that we're trying to do with JavaScript is trying to like build interactivity, which can have the form of like when you click on something, if you like want an interaction to happen in the page. So like let's just look around the web here for interactivity. A lot of stuff is done with so like this little rollover here. This would be a great thing that's done with JavaScript here. So like here, like whenever I roll over one of these little items, I'm getting like a social widget to show up here. So if you think about the things that are happening, when I have my mouse away, I move my mouse in, something is detecting that my mouse is there right now, and then it's going to go and actually going to create additional HTML so that like I can see it in the browser. So that interaction is what we call like evented. So you wire up an event that is your mouse moves into this region, and then you respond to that. So we can actually create an interaction very simply with that, very much like that, and very simply using jQuery. I'm going to show you how to do that next. But in the meantime, just take 1 second. I'm going to pull mine out in a second. Almost pull yours. jQuery mouse in. Yeah. Let's try hover actually. So if you pull up the jQuery docs and hover, this will be like the first one to kind of look at. So again, you can create something that's very similar to that interaction we just looked at. So take a peek at that. I'm going to plug my computer in so I don't run out of juice. You know what? Yeah, I don't actually have much right. Maybe we'll mark this out. We can just straighten some of that. Yeah, both of them are. Sorry. Thank you. Okay, so if we wanted to kind of like, so let me show you a little bit about how jQuery works. So jQuery is all based on CSS selectors. So if we go back to like, does everybody have like something like this little link guy on our page? All right, I think we've all seen that. So let's go ahead and let's disable the tooltipster stuff. That was cool for the time being, and that's just an example, but it's not gonna. We're gonna build it in a different direction. So now if I go back here, I see like the default. When I roll over this, I see the default system tooltip message, but there's no additional interaction. That I would just get that regardless of any JavaScript here. From the console here, the $sign is a. Let me zoom in here so you can see this. The $sign is an alias for the jQuery selector. So jQuery is this engine that lets you manipulate the DOM, which is like the HTML, which is the browser representation of what's on the page, and it lets you respond to different events that you may be doing as a user. So the way that this is like this construction is what's called a factory. So you can pass all kinds of different things in as an argument to jQuery, and the jQuery library will like handle them in a way that it thinks is appropriate. This is a little bit like the way that Rails like active record methods work. So you can pass lots of different things into. If you pass, for example, into find, you can pass the ID of a product. You can pass a product ID into there. You can also pass an array of product IDs, and you can also pass an ID as a string. And all of those, Rails will figure out how to do the right thing with. So it's kind of like a factory style method as well. So one of the things that I do most often with jQuery is I'll pass in a CSS selector. So in this case, I know that I have something on this page, and it's called show tooltip. That's that link that. Let me kind of collapse these so we get a little closer together. So this link that we created on the page together, if I use the selector for that, this would be the same as the CSS selector. So like we probably looked at this a little bit when you guys talked about Bootstrap, but CSS selectors, there are two shortcuts. Like generally the way that we write CSS is we do it by the class of elements. So this show tooltip class, we can use it to style the element. Have you guys done like CSS classes and stuff like that already? To some degree? A little bit? Okay, so just like going back, just to show you that this is really just a regular old CSS selector. If I go back to the application CSS and I say show tooltip, I can set the color to red here. So I'm going to do this in application.css. And then back in here, you'll see like now the color is red. So I can use the class on this item in order to essentially like identify this particular instance of a link. So if I styled, and this would be this helps you so that in the event that you had another link on your page, but you don't want it to have that same class or have that same color, you would just not use the same CSS class. So here I have link and other link. One of them has red, one of them doesn't. So that's kind of how CSS classes work. So you can use CSS classes, like the way that Bootstrap works is, it depends on you to organize your DOM in a particular way, and then it will go ahead and it'll style stuff for you. So in a situation where you have like these nice button classes that you get for free with Bootstrap, it's these CSS classes here that are actually making that stuff happen. So when you apply like class BTN and BTN default onto these elements, then you're actually going to get that behavior. And you can see the effect of that by just doing like an inspect element there, and then going into the class here and actually just taking them away. Then you'll see now it just returns to the default style. You see that? So this is a great way to experiment, and it's something I do all the time. Is I go into the inspect element to learn more about how pages are put together, because your browser will respond to this stuff immediately. There's no delay at all. So if you wanted, for example, to see what the effect of button large is, if you go and remove that class, you see the change goes back, and then if I reapply it, it'll get big again. So that kind of thing. So that's like a little bit on CSS selectors. In the context of JavaScript, we'll actually be using CSS selectors to find items. So what I could do here is I could say, let's go look for let me bring it back in here so you can see. If I go through the show tooltip, the thing that has a show tooltip class. Okay, so that's this link here. And what's really nice about Chrome is that when you roll over an item that gets returned from a jQuery selector, it'll show you the item in the DOM. Show tooltip is kind of a dumb name for this, so I'm going to go and rename that class to be. I'm going to change this up a little bit. I'm going to call this. Okay, I'm going to call this rollover item. So now I have a little bit more simple code here, and I'm going to say, okay, roll over item. Okay, so that's the same link here. It's this link that goes to Caleb Jones's homepage, Caleb Jacobs' homepage. Okay, so in jQuery, you can use any CSS selector. So attribute names themselves are also valid CSS selectors. So, or tag names. So h1 is an example. So that would give me this hello class here. And then if you pass on a selector that doesn't have any matches, so if I, for example, I look for h2, then I'll just get an empty array, which is totally fine. The way that jQuery works is you can, once you've like kind of identified something that you want to work on, there are a whole bunch of methods that come with the jQuery library that are really, really helpful. They're kind of full size. They are organized really, really nicely on this documentation page into Things that have to do with CSS, manipulating like what CSS classes are applied to stuff. Things that have to do with effects, meaning like, which I'll show you in a second, which is like sliding things in and out, handling events, and then manipulating DOM. There are a couple other things in here, but I think that those are basically the places that I would get started with, if I'm getting started with jQuery. We'll go back to this beta store thing. Fade out is like kind of like a perennial example in JavaScript. So there's a fade out method that's applied to, you can call it any jQuery class, and it'll just go ahead and it'll make that object like kind of go off the page. You've probably seen this interaction a ton, like in just the regular old web, where you like interact with something and then it just fades away. If you go to the elements screen, this is kind of cool. You can actually see how this is implemented to some degree. But for example, if I look at this H1 in here, so just watch this H1 as you call fade in or fade out. Call fade out. You'll notice that really, if you watch that real closely, that opacity number actually changes in the DOM. So watch like right here, and you'll see it actually has a couple different iterations there. And what's happening is that the way that fade in and fade out works is that there's a little animation loop that jQuery puts together that will actually change the opacity like point by point over a time span. So I want to show you guys how some of these docs work because you'll use this to like build up more complicated behavior. So if we just look for this is kind of the way that I actually do this in practice. So just look for fade out, jQuery, and then you'll notice that this takes docs for jQuery are all kind of the same. So fade out takes two options, and they're both optional. So the brackets here means that it's optional. So it takes a duration, and then it takes complete. What do those mean? Well, you scroll down a little further, and I'll explain it. So duration is the number of string to determine how long the animation should run. So this 400, that probably means 400 milliseconds. And then complete is a function that will get called when it's done. It also is the case that almost all jQuery functions are super parameterized. So you can also pass in an options hash. Whenever they say plain object, they mean it's like a hash, which is plain object and hash are kind of the same thing in JavaScript. So there are all different kinds of things that you can change the behavior of here, like in these docs. So just to show you a quick example of that, back in our example, we should be able to fade out that H1 over the course of, let's say, like 1,000 milliseconds instead of 400. And you see how it goes a lot slower that way. You can actually see the opacity a lot easier when you kind of do it that way. Are people able to like observe and experiment with that in their browser? Okay, cool. So the next thing I want to show you guys is this. Remember we looked at that this like really cool little interaction here where you kind of roll over these things and things come up and down. I want to show you guys how to kind of build something like that too. So if I go to that link, the one that on the page here, this A tag here, I'm going to go ahead and use that special class that I made, rollover items. What I might want to do is when you roll over this link, like let's say that what I want to do is like show more information about like the link. So if I have a span, let's call this more info. Okay. So now I've got the link and I've got more info. This is shown on it's shown all the time. So let's pretend like we have a lot of these, which we will. Okay. Okay, so if I'm going to eventually make a lot of this like link and more info thing as if I had a list of like, you know, like when you like list resources, like list of product or something like that. Before I do that, I want the more info to be hidden by default. So in order to do that, I'm going to go ahead and apply some CSS to it. So I'll just say class. I'll call this more info as well. This would be like additional information. So like some more stuff. So I'll take this more info. I'll take this more info thing, and I will go into my application CSS file, and I'll set some CSS on here, and the CSS that I'll set is CSS is a display none, and that's CSS to just hide the element. So now I see the link, I don't see the more info, but if I inspect element, there is this more info here. It's not visible to the user, and I can kind of like interact with it here by just unchecking this display none. So that kind of works. So let me kind of show you how the example is going to work, and then I'm going to give you guys all a chance to kind of catch up. So if I just take this p tag and I like repeat it a whole bunch of times, now what I'm going to have on my page is like a bunch of these links, and then next to each link is a see more stuff tag that's hidden. So what I want to do is when the A tag gets rolled over, I want the more stuff to show up. This is like a reasonable request. Agreed? So the way that I'll actually implement that is pretty easy in jQuery. This is my little example here. So I'm going to say, okay. So this syntax in the beginning, this is really, really common in jQuery, is that you want to have this. This is called document ready. What you're actually doing here is you're passing an empty function into the jQuery object. So just the same way that we can pass a selector from the console. Like I said, you can pass all kinds of different things in here. So you can pass a selector that's a string, or you can pass. Actually, turns out you can pass HTML into here as well. If you pass a function into jQuery, what that'll do is that'll actually make sure that the code inside of it only gets run once the entire page is initialized. If we do it before that time, it won't be on the document won't be ready yet. The browser won't load all the HTML. So let's just go ahead and use that for a second. I'll explain that more in just a second. And then what I'm going to do is whenever you go over one of these rollover items, so rollover item. Okay, so I'm going to go look for all the rollover items, and I'm going to say, and we'll go back to jQuery docs. I think we said hover. So you see this has a little bit different, it's a very, very similar, all these doc pages are obviously very similar. So this one takes two arguments, so hover takes two arguments. What hover does is it, kind of make this, you can see it. Can you guys see that okay? It takes two things, it takes a handler in and a handler out. And these are functions that are gonna run when the event hover occurs. So if we go back to our stuff, we're going to say hover here. Okay, so we're going to pass in two different functions. And then what we'll do is, just to start off, we'll say console log. Console.log. And hover out. So if we go back to our list of tooltips, it's over here. Forward. See, okay. Okay, so notice as I kind of roll over these in the log, I'm getting all kinds of new messages. Let me clear that again. So here, as I move in and out here, I'm getting all these different messages. Agreed? So if what I wanted to do instead was to have that next element sort of show up, what I'll want to do is go find this span here. So there's a particular syntax for that. So what I'll do is I'll go look for it. I'll say Well, actually, let's just get there. Let's do like the console, the hover, and the console log stuff. Let's see if everybody can kind of figure out how to do that. So, the couple of tricks here are go back in your application, go back into your set up something in your on your page. So what I had is I had a bunch of p tags that have an item I want to hover over. So like here I had a link, and then I had this more info that I wanted to hide. And then in your application JS file, you want to go and find all of those and start to handle the hover event. So I'll just kind of go around and let's just see if we can get kind of the same thing. Let me go put this into a split view so you guys can see this in two different ways. And let me make this size a little smaller. Scroll out. All right. I feel like that should kind of cover it. Okay, cool. All right. So let's see if we can kind of figure this out. So you've got the source. This is the HTML. And this is the JavaScript. I like to have p tag and that's it's not the right. Yeah. Yeah, you said you've done some research before, right? Yeah. Is this like this familiar to you, or? Yeah. Sort of. You have a place for this actually. Your guy actually, that's just not like this. That's a little right. So we can just do the class page. Your buy's already It's just, it's simple. Yeah, you would. So it's like, see the way that Google Maps for photographers, it's see, it says it takes two different functions. It's a function for when the maps point pictures and for when it leaves. So that means that so back in your code, you're already defining maybe some function. But you use the function keyword there. It's just the word function. So you've got that one it's a little different. So this is the jQuery object. You're passing to it. And then this is the hover method. And it takes two functions. This one. And that's when you hover in. And then you divide this function when you hover out. So just like
fact, I want the entire page. Oh no, there's a Reddit. This is subreddit too, where they have like the title of the section is like how to buy a website, and then like the entire thing is just including CSS files. It didn't make any sense that that pictures of like highlight like one of these and it would take up the entire page. Or you try to click on one link and then another link would like explode in size. It's a lot of writing in that one too.
Alright, cool. So everybody's kind of on the same page there. So now what we're going to kind of build on is, like, instead of just console logging, we can do all kinds of stuff in this little block here. Let me kind of go back to my page here. So if a really cool way that you can kind of explore the jQuery API, particularly in Chrome, is if you select on an element in the page. So if you click on this like A tag here, it's actually available to you in the console as $0. So that's like, good thing I'm here to show you guys. But yeah, how would you know that? But it's I think I read about it in a blog post. But it's basically the idea is it's the first argument in the console. So if you pick it, it doesn't matter which element it is. So like if I say $0, it'll be represented by that thing here. So this is like the DOM element that I selected. So like the actual like piece of HTML. In order for me to like sort of use all the special jQuery methods like fade out and fade in, I actually need to. It seems a little confusing here, but I need to send it into the jQuery operator. So I need to either do jQuery and pass in the object, or I can use the shorthand that everybody uses, which is $. So it looks very strange, but what you want to do is you want to pass in $0 into jQuery, and that will be the element that you just selected. So you can use this to kind of debug, to try out and build up scripts. So the interaction that I want to do is I want more info to show up. So I can say $0, and then there are some really cool DOM traversal, what they call DOM traversal methods. Traversal meaning like move around. So here what I'm going to do is I'm going to go up to the parent, and I want to go and find something called more info. So more info. So that's going to give me this element that you can't actually see, and I want to show that. And then when I go out, I'm going to do the opposite. I'm going to say hide. So the difference being, so that's how I built the algorithm here in the console, which I think is a really, really nice way to do development. And then I can pretty much just paste it back over into my into my scripts here. So when I hover in, I want to show this, and when I go out, I hide it. And the only difference here is that instead of $0, what I actually want is I want this keyword. This means the object that received the hover event. So in this case, it'll be the rollover item. So let's just make sure that that actually works. So over these things, I still have the console logs firing here, but you see, I'm getting that behavior that I'm looking for. So let's try that out. So that's kind of that's the answer. But we can talk for a second about how we got there. So if we go to the jQuery docs and we go to DOM traversing. Or the internet. If you guys go to the internet, then what you'll find is it'll explain these functions. Basically, what parent does, if this is kind of the easiest to understand by just looking at like this, like a little chunk of HTML. So this is what I'm clicking on, this item here, this A tag. So parent is going to go up and find whoever is at the same level as it, or as whoever is the parent of it, whoever contains it. So this p tag is the parent. And then what I want to do is inside of the parent, I actually want to go and find another element. So I can use the find method to make another jQuery selector. So I would say inside of this p tag, go find something called more info. And then there's a method called show, which is like kind of like fade in or fade out. So that'll make it available to me versus hide, which will actually make it go away. So that's how I kind of built up that whole algorithm. Why don't you guys give that a shot now? I know everybody has a little bit different tree structure, so I'll kind of like walk around and see like kind of where everybody is, and then that'll kind of give us a chance to have the same kind of interaction. So like this is just the kind of the building blocks that you can build a lot more complicated stuff with. But this showing and hiding, I think, is a pretty cool start. And it's a little bit confusing that the CSS class or a class that's an attribute of a HTML element. It has nothing to do with the Ruby class. It's only in the sense that they are. It's a way a class means that there can be any thing, and so you use classes in CSS and HTML to say that these things are similar in some way, meaning that you're going to select them with JavaScript or with CSS. Similar there. It's much more fuzzy than a Ruby class. If two things are the same Ruby class, their implementation will be the same. Yeah, right? I know, it's a lot of, it's totally agree. Like, when I look at this, alright, let's, it's a little kind of weird. Let me see if I can deconvolve this a little bit. So, without taking that stuff off the screen. So like, here's a function. This is just called like a. So that's the syntax for just creating a function. And I can call this function. So suppose this function was like console log you called the function a. Okay, so that's like good JavaScript syntax right there. Cool. And then I can call it here, and what I'll get is you called the function a. That'll be that. That's actually not the right comment line. So that'll give you that thing. So then if I have another function, b, and suppose that takes an argument. Suppose it takes the argument. Let's say, let's call this one instead of a, we'll call it name. Okay, so this will be name. This will just return the TJ. Now if I say, like, this is like a more classic example, so if I call this one like say name, and I want a name in here, then okay, so these are two different functions. Say name here is looking for a single argument. And then I can convolve these together by saying say name, then passing in name. And this syntax should be pretty easy, pretty familiar to you from Ruby. The only thing that's weird is that the $sign is it's not a reserved word in JavaScript. You can just use it just like in Ruby, you can have like methods that have a question mark. In JavaScript, you can have functions that either are $sign or start with $sign. And it's just kind of a tradition, like back to that idea of like saving characters, is that the really special jQuery operator has always been abbreviated with the $sign. So if you think about what's happening here is I have essentially a function that is like do everything. That's this function. And I'm going to pass the do everything function into jQuery, meaning you should run this do everything function when the page is loaded. So that's kind of where that syntax comes from. So this is actually the name of the function that you're calling. The $sign is the name of the function. And then a function itself is just this function keyword, followed by parens, followed by curly braces. So the parens are kind of like a, like a do end in Ruby. And then this function keyword is like kind of like the def part. So that's kind of where that all comes from. All right. This is like totally new for you guys, so don't be discouraged at all. I wanted to sort of like, we'll kind of get back on track with like class and lectures and stuff next week, but I kind of wanted to like, see if we could like pick up some of this JavaScript stuff and see if it would help you guys in your hackathon. If it ends up this can't help you guys, we'll just keep moving. You know? So that's totally gonna work. So is that 5 minutes? Is that kind of what we're doing? Not really. Okay. So it could be that you're even depends how your DOM is set up, right? So like this link does it have an area? Yeah, see how they get pages set up. You got a link. It's got a parent. It's free. Does it have anything tied to the show or hide it?
Oh, okay, gotcha.
So the P is the parent, but then you need something. If you want to like do the same example I did, you need something else. So you can expand or something that you're like showing hiding.
Gotcha.
I just want another item. Like this is like you've got it all kind of set up here. You got a P, you got a link. Well, the whole goal here, the goal of like the feature that I was checking out was when you roll over a link, you want this additional information to show up. So you can imagine this as like being like if you like have a catalog of products and like maybe like when you roll over it says how many reviews are for this product. You can imagine that being like this information, like how many reviews there are. I think you probably have that interaction like what or like how many stars it has.
Yeah.
So like when I roll over this thing, I want to display this other piece of information. So in your example, you would want to just go ahead and like create something on the page, just arbitrarily, and then show and hide it based on whether I can cover it.
Okay.
Did you
That's
roll over there?
That's cool. It's just shown by default because like that's how just the equation works. So if you want to be hidden by default, all you need to do is just go change your CSS to hide it. So you have that more info.
You're doing
That's what you need to top for that.
you're working with two different syntaxes. In this case, this is escape Ruby. In that case, it would be open easy split, but in this case, this is just it's just so you want to set class.
So that's going to say go and find it. Something with a class. But so that's going to help you do it. But then in order for it to hit by default, you want to go into the application CSS. This is the more info part of it. All at the top. And then just say that one. Okay.
It's like you'll hover over it and then like buy now will come from like all corners of the page and just start appearing.
At the So let's say
Let's see where this
anybody that has this
see
And then
where
you
you say no.
enable you show us. All right. He's got this. All right.
Maybe you're having fun.
Yeah, I'm not using the
So
Yeah.
you have a below, right? You only do one of these problems. Like that line 31, you actually don't have this. It's a little funny, but the second argument is a function by itself, and then it just goes right to that in this parameter. So you don't have to let it at all. The way it works is two things. Something from the way in and something from the way out. So here's the first argument, and here's the second argument. This is close up over, it's close up left, right? So you go to your page, see if you get it, into there, see if you get a JavaScript. This is, that's kind of cool. So that looks really good, so you're getting it on all of them. The problem with what's happening is the parent is it's something big. So depending on how you set up, that was right. So you know, you just gotta this, these are all these, so that's gotta be so that probably solve this. Just kind of so you have something. So that's like this. So I'll select all ones. Yeah, it's all you gotta do is you're in the moment center, so it's either it's move around, that's definitely it's working. So you just uncenter it, you'll run those. Oh, that's great. No worries. Nice, you go fitting in and out. Oh, I love it. So like, this is kind of how we're trying to do it. Get your thing, get your more info there. Okay.
So, as far as warrant is concerned, let's say I want to put it,
Yeah, this is exactly. I think it's a great idea. They're ready to come.
so yeah, I want to put it here somewhere.
Sure.
So why should I just open
It doesn't matter what.
something like that? Make it
Yeah. So listen, table, right? So it needs to be nested inside of a TP, otherwise you're going to be kind of doing a violation of the way tables are supposed to work. So you can, what I usually do if I'm going to put a lot of stuff inside of a TD is I'll like open that TD and then make a new line, and then indent it and stuff. And so I can definitely context and all that stuff is you know all that stuff is inside that TD now. So like line 24, yeah. So that'll be in there. You already have an A. You said you have a link to. A link to that's going to create an A tag, and you already set the class to roll over right up, so you're in good shape there. So what you could do is you could roll it over. For example, like you could roll it over and then reveal the ID. That might be a way to do it. Go like reveal price, or you just reveal order.
So like I could here just
Yeah. It doesn't like an A tag probably just makes more sense because A means like link. So I would just use a span. Span just means some amount of text. Doesn't actually do anything. So there are your products. You just give it a class and define it. So you just call it. You call it hidden product ID or something like that. But yeah, that's just cool.
that's the naming convention for classes in HTML.
Yeah, use dashes. Dashes are just makes it a little bit easier. So now what you're gonna do is instead of finding more info, you're gonna find you're gonna find that class that you came up with. use Apple B. So use Apple. Yeah, well, it's Apple. It's only if you have multiple things that are the same.
Right. You can select them all.
Yeah, I love that. Alright, cool. That's good. Alright, so there's your thing. The other thing is you want to yeah. So that's kind of right. So you've got so you can hit it when it moves away. You're not revealing it, which is the end of the world, honestly.
No, it's just something complicated.
So let's go back here. So you roll over item, and you. Oh, that's good.
There we go.
So then my problem is when you first load the page up, if you refresh it one more time, the product IDs are shown. So how are you going to get them to be hidden when you start the page?
Something that
Is it hidden? Yeah. Now you could probably just use the CSS for that. You could inline it if you wanted to inline it, but CSS is a good place for that. So we go for application CSS and set that hidden ID to spin up. How'd you do? Nice. Nice.
it's already
Let's see more stuff. Looks good.
it's already
So is that, but if you, okay, so that's okay. So you got the same issue in Hackcast, but is you got a JavaScript error, which is good. You have JavaScript. Actually, you should be working. I think your application or application JS. Alright, cool. Yeah, so this looks totally good. So you just want to hide that hide the more info by default. So you can you probably just do it in the application CSS. Or close, but not. The problem is it's going to be really persistent on that point. Yeah. Will do. And then I'm going to try to refresh that. Lower that button. Some more stuff. Okay, so that's pretty good. So that's not finding it, but you get back to your JavaScript file, maybe you'll find a way to page missing the dot. Because that's not a valid CSS line. So that's good. It had a dot there. Line with a dot. Dot means go look for a class. It's a shortcut. Go over. Alright. Alright, cool. So that's pretty cool. So let's talk a little bit more about this this jQuery stuff for 1 second. I want to try to explain the document ready piece, like why you have to like nest it inside of this function. I think that in order to do that, I think what I'm going to do is I'll comment this out, and I will see what's up. All right, let me. Okay, so if you look at what happens now, so if I don't, so by commenting that out, it's the same as if I, let me just clean this up for you guys so you can see a little better. Okay, so if I do my rollover stuff without the document ready, you'll notice that it doesn't really work, which is no surprise to anybody because I'm sure you guys all had it not working at some point, but there's a very specific reason why it doesn't work, and I'm going to show you that now. When you're in JavaScript, one of the coolest things you can do is you can use the debugger keyword to just freeze the browser. This is the same as when you use binding.pry, which we use all the time in Rails. So if you hit debugger here, you'll notice, well, let me actually do one thing. Let me put the debugger keyword inside of document ready. Okay. So, I'll do it 2 times. So, whoops, no, just kidding, console log. Outside of document ready, and then this is inside. So I'll show you how the debugger thing works. It always gives you this little plus sign or this little resume button, play button at the top, which lets you continue rendering the page. All your log messages will run up until you get to that point. You notice the rest of the browser is a little weird, like this little status bar, for example, is stuck. Like all the development tools will work pretty much the same. in this sources panel, it'll show you the line that's highlighted. This line highlighted. This is the line that's stuck on. And then you also have all of these really cool tools that are available to you in Pry, but are a little bit less visual. Like you can inspect local variables and stuff like that, which is pretty cool. There's a lot to be said about that. But let me go ahead and resume, and then I'll hit the next debugger. So here now I'm inside document ready. You notice anything different between the stuff that's on the page between the two again? Let's try one more time. So this is the first debugger, and then I keep going, and this is my second debugger. Notice all the links are on the page now. So when I hit the first time, there's actually nothing on the page. And then later on, now they're all there. So what's happening is that if you go to view page source, your browser actually downloads this HTML like byte by byte, like starting at the top and going all the way to the bottom. And then you can think of it as like character by character or line by line. So as it encounters script tags, it will try to download them as fast as it can, and then it will. So what'll happen is your browser is going to start at 1. It's going to go down here. When it encounters a title tag, it'll try to render the title out. Then when it encounters all these link tags, it's going to start fetching those resources. So it'll go and try to download them from your local server here, one by one. And then as it finishes them, it's going to execute them in the order that it was encountered. So it'll execute this, and then it'll execute this, and then it'll execute this, and so forth, all the way down the page. And then you'll notice their application.js, that's the very last one, and then after that is the definition of the page. So what's happening when we hit the breakpoint the very first time is that we're here in the source, but the browser hasn't actually like downloaded and interpreted the rest of the page yet. So it's kind of a model that's enforced by the browser. So in fact, the browser may actually like download a little bit more of it, but it'll wait to interpret the rest of this HTML until it's done loading all those assets at the top. And so that is why we use the document ready method, because what that means is it's a special little jQuery. It's a special jQuery operation that says wait for the DOM to be downloaded and parsed before you go into action, and that makes it more intuitive to do stuff like go looking for items on the page and so forth. So if I move this back into document ready, then you'll see exactly what I mean. So now I get the interaction that I want. So when it wasn't there, that wasn't the case. This is actually the shorthand for a longer syntax, which is if you pass the keyword doc. There's actually an item. There's an instance. There's a single instance of a class called document, which represents the whole page in JavaScript. And so what you're actually doing is you're passing in document here, and then you're saying, just like with hover, ready, and then you pass a function out. Let me scroll so you can see what I mean. So this is just like when we did with hover, when we passed in a function and then we passed in a second function. That's exactly what document ready means. So it's you pass the document into jQuery and then you call ready on that. But since you do that all the time, there's a shortcut for it, which is just to say pass a function into jQuery, and it will be the same as if you were to manually write out $document.ready. Does that kind of make a little bit of sense to people?
So that like will instantly
Yeah, exactly. In tooltips, exactly. So when we copied that example from, really, that's a really great point, Robbie. When we copied that example from tooltips, they had it written out more explicitly. And I actually meant to write out more explicitly when I wrote it, but I just am so used to writing that shortcut that I did it that way. So this is definitely the more explicit way, and you can see why it's called document ready. If you kind of read it, you'd say document ready. That's the way you read it. So that's ensuring that all of your elements are on the page before you go ahead and fire in JavaScript. And so particularly whenever you're working with a JavaScript with jQuery, you want to make sure that like any interaction that you're depending on happens inside of document ready. And that will make sure that the elements are all on the page and ready to be manipulated before you go and try to wire up any interactivity. Okay. All right. So one of the things I kind of wanted to show you guys was this data attribute stuff. We only have like an hour left here, but it's a pretty cool little interaction. So I'm gonna go ahead and let's see. You guys all have products, I think, in your stores. I think it would be really cool and this is kind of goes back to the idea of like stuff that would be cool for your hackathon stuff. I think it'd be really cool to be able to like show a list of your products and then be able to have your customers like rate them, like plus them up and down, kind of like a Reddit style thing. So if you had a list of products like that, what you could do right now with the Rails that you have is you could render form buttons to plus up and down the products. And then what would happen is you click on it, you'd use like a button 2, just like how when you use destroy. So you use a button 2, and that would have to go to a product action, and then that would like increment the number of votes on it. So I think what I'm going to do is I'll show you guys kind of how to implement that in Rails, and then I'll also show you how to come back around and kind of do it with jQuery so that it's a little bit more slick, if that makes sense. That'd be cool. All right. So let's go ahead and do something like that. Yeah, and I was kind of thinking exactly of a thing that you guys have been working on, so that you'd be able to do. But it's not an interaction that's at all unique to like your guys' project. It's something that I think everybody can apply to any project they work on, which is like being able to like vote for stuff. I feel like that's pretty common. So let me do a quick little bit of scaffolding here since I'm a little bit behind you guys. Rails, G model, product. Okay, so I'm going to have a name that's a string, and then I'll have votes that's an integer. Yeah. So you guys won't have to do this. I just need to do this because I don't have the same thing that you have. So I'm just going to use a name that's a string and votes that's an integer. Okay. And this will also be a quick little review of like some basic stuff that you guys have done in Rails, like hopefully a couple different times here. Create table product. And okay, cool. So rate give you my rate. All right, and then I'm going to go ahead and make a class, a model for it too. Product. Class product. You guys already have a product, so I would just leave it alone. Like if you want to, So if you want to add a votes column, just add a votes column to your product. So you can go ahead and you can generate a migration to do that. So you would just Rails generate migration, add votes to product, and you'll be able to go ahead and add that column. And then what I'm going to do is, since you guys already have a list of products, I'm going to go ahead and add that real quick.
Well, here it's not plural, so I'm assuming it's not plural. It's plural, you're having to get the tables there. It's not. You're adding. So in this case, it's adding flag products.
Okay,
In this
cool.
case, I'm adding those products.
So yeah, so if you guys, since you guys don't have the votes on your products, let's just go ahead and look at the migration for that. So it would be essentially, so if this was the create migration, if you had, so this is like, if this is like created from scratch, your migration would be something like add column, exactly. So it would be, exactly. So you'd use an add column to add the product, add the votes to there, and then I set the default to 0, which is probably a good call. And you guys have used default values I think before, so that would be add column products votes. Then next comes the type integer default 0. So perfect. So yeah, so one or the other. Okay, so now I have a list of products. You have a more complicated list of products. The next thing that we're going to want to do is we're going to have buttons that, let's display the number of votes actually. So I'm going to go ahead and modify my, my product thing to put the votes in a, put this little span tag, and it'll be product.votes. All right, and that is going to have to do with it. Okay, so I'll just make the color blue instead of. Okay, so these all have 0 votes. Then the next thing I'm going to want to do is I'm going to make buttons that go them up and down. So all right, so I'm going to have these +1 and these -1 buttons, something like that. And then the interaction that I would imagine, and this is kind of an important thing to understand, is like, it's good to kind of scaffold stuff out. So like the interaction that I would imagine is that as I hit these plus and minus buttons, this number would go up and down. Agreed? Okay, cool. So in order for that to happen, we're gonna have to kind of go through a couple different things. So the first thing that we're gonna have to do is we're gonna need a new endpoint on the products controller to manage the changing of the votes. Because we want something to go back to our server to say, there's a new property that we want to go ahead and update. So one way that you could do that is that you could update the whole product. So like the way that we do, like when we do like an edit update action on the like admin products controller. But what that'll do there is that'll kind of like, you don't want necessarily people to be able to update the name or the price or any of that, even though my products don't have names or have prices. But your products have prices and all kinds of other things that are not going to be affected by your users. You really just want them to be able to increment and decrement the votes, kind of like Reddit style. And so it's probably a better look to expose a more limited endpoint. So I think the way that I would probably do this is I'd make some new methods here. Vote up and vote down. So that would be your hint. And then what I think you guys should think about next is if you wanted to have these vote up and down methods, do we have the skills and Rails to do a couple things to do. All right, so to do create routes for those actions, and then use a button in order to exercise the routes. Let's just implement the actions. So these are the things that I would try to do. Implement the actions, meaning like what should vote up do, what should vote down do. Create routes so that they show up in the routes file, or so that they create routes in the routes file so that they're accessible, and then use a button to in place of these like placeholder buttons so that they actually can exercise, so they actually can vote up and down. So when we say like implement these actions, like what does that mean? What do we want to do? Like what would we do inside the body of vote up?
So add one to the current product.
Yeah, that's a good call. So go find the product, params ID. So now I have them. Then product. Actually, I think there's an increment method that takes the name of an attribute. You want to increment up, so increment moves up. Let's just take a look. Yep, sure enough. So on active record base, there's a method called increment, and it takes the attribute. So that'll increment oops. And then vote down, it'll be kind of the same thing. I bet there's a decrement one. What's that? Well, this is local here. So I'm not necessarily going to expose this back to the view. It's just local to this particular method here. So I'd suggest that would be kind of the implementation. What about the routes? What do you guys think about the routes for these things? How do you route to an action? So is vote up and vote down, are they like standard Rails RESTful actions? No, we just made those up. So have we ever done any like non-RESTful actions on resources before? Cool. Awesome. Cool. So I think you guys all have this, like if you like generate your Rails application from scratch, you've got a whole bunch of like good examples in the routes file. And it turns out that this little block here, where it says products with this member thing, that's actually exactly what we want to do as well. So member here, this means on a particular member, this means that on a particular instance of your model, as opposed to collection, which would mean like on all of them. So when you mean member, it needs to have an ID in there in the URL. So it's something like vote up would be at slash products. Put the hash sign. Slash products slash ID slash vote up. That would be a member method, versus a collection one would be no ID in there. That would be products vote up. So if there was something that you wanted to do that you could do to all the products at once, like for example, the only thing I think of would be like maybe delete all, like that could be a thing, or like maybe you want to update, maybe products isn't as good. Maybe if you had an upload and you wanted to upload a whole new set of products, you could do that on the collection, or you could mark. I guess this is saying you could also get stuff. So like you could say if you had a new filter here that was called this says sold or most popular. So like that would be a method that you would get on all of the products themselves, and that would help you fulfill that. So vote up, that's just going to be on the member itself. So if we use a get here for this, what we'll be able to visit in the browser, but there's a big minus to that in the sense that because we're changing the state of the server, yeah, it's too easy to. What? Yeah, we'll have to redirect definitely. So let's just go ahead. We'll start this as gets, just so we can kind of like follow this mistake to its conclusion. I'm gonna go ahead and bring this back to the right here and go to the right. Okay. So then these paths here, I think I'll get those paths automatically actually. So let me go ahead and run rake routes. Okay, yeah. Vote up product, so if you can see that. Vote up product and vote down product. Those are routes that I got automatically for us because we did it on member. And you can see how it names it. It puts the custom action. It prefixes it on the resource. Yeah. So then in here, if we wanted to use, if we had link twos instead of buttons, so let's take these out for a second. If we had link twos, this will be +1. This will be products. Vote up product path. This will be vote down. Then back in the browser. No route matches that required ID. Okay, that totally makes sense because, like we said, it's on a particular product, so I need to pass in the product so that I can get the ID there. Otherwise, that path doesn't make any sense. So now I've got these +1 and -1 buttons, but it's true there's no actual redirect, so I'll get to like missing thing. But if you notice. I think what I should have done, should have happened there was that. Okay, so let's redirect back to index. Direct to. Alright, so as I click on these, I guess you can't do that anymore. Product stop. Alright, so we're moving around. I'm not seeing things change because maybe I have to call save. Let that happen automatically. Okay, so now I'm moving things around. Unfortunately, the ordering is moving all around too. So, Alright, so here if I press 6, it's moving, it's going around here. You can see that from this like quickie interaction here. And if you notice, I am like going to that vote up and vote down there. So I'd say the biggest minus of this approach, like, is, well, there are a couple minuses of this approach. First of all, because I'm doing this in a get, this is going to be this is going to open us up to all kinds of particular potential problems. It seems that because this is like a navigation event, so I can like copy this link address, and every single time I open this up on a new page, it's going to produce another vote. That's just not very HTTP friendly because when you modify server state, you always want to have that behind a different HTTP method. Gets are like the regular way that you navigate the web, but if you're going to go change state, you really should use a post for that instead. So that's like I think the first issue that I have with this implementation. The second one is that it seems super fast when I'm here in the browser, which is cool. But I'm definitely like navigating around and doing that redirect, and that's where I think the jQuery stuff will come in. So the first thing we should do is we should move this vote method into a post so that people don't accidentally go to it, or navigate or change the state by accident. It's a little bit different when you use a post because that's when you get that occasional like essentially like by refreshing it you won't be able to increment the number forever and ever. So let's go back to the routes file and we'll move that back into a post. But what that'll mean is that I won't be able to go to this route anymore because there is no get. I'll have to switch it back to a button. So back in index, rather than link to, I'm going to use button to. And now, if you notice, these guys, now like the style is kind of a little whack on them for a couple of reasons. The first thing is that in order to now I'm getting the really good interaction that like when I roll over this I don't have a particular link in mind, so that means I'm not going to be able to just go navigate to it by accident by like putting it into my browser URL, like putting it into this part here. So I'm like actually creating a really good post action, which is like way more restful and way more appropriate. But like these are actually a little hidden form tag. So if you notice, you kind of like scroll in here. Each of these things, the way that button 2 is implemented is Rails will create a small form for you, such that you can like encapsulate a post action all together in one little place without without having to like make a lot of boilerplate code. So this little form is here, and the reason the style is off is because forms by default are displayed block. So if we wanted to get those to display in line, it would be pretty easy. We would just say display in line. And then I think that guy, this guy should display in line. So left. Either way. So okay, so we could restyle this guy to display in line the way that was before, so that it just had those little buttons next to each other. But I think the other thing that I kind of think is kind of annoying about this particular interaction is suppose I'm like way down the page, like I'm at product 7 and I hit a plus. It's going to bring me all the way back up to the page because I have had to make a round trip to the server. Like when I hit plus here or minus here, I have to post to the server, and then I have to get a whole new web page, and that web page has to get displayed back to the browser. And so I'll lose kind of where I am in this interaction. Agreed? So we can go ahead and we can change this interaction with jQuery. And this will kind of be the last thing we do today. I know that we've been a little bit all over the place, but I wanted to get to this Ajax stuff because this is kind of one of the coolest things you can do with jQuery. And also, like, it could be a thing that's like kind of fun to hack on and to try to make a better interaction with. So we've got the Rails button 2s here, and they're like hanging out here doing their thing. I think one thing you can do by default is I think you can say remote. I think that might make Rails do this remotely. Okay, yeah, so that's kind of cool. So by saying remote true, then what will happen is that Rails will submit this in the background, but this number won't necessarily won't increment on its own. So this is definitely like a Rails trick that was kind of invented specifically to avoid having to like wire up your own jQuery stuff. But it's not the interaction we want here because we really want this vote to go up and down, not by having to refresh it. So remote true isn't exactly what we want, but I just wanted to kind of bring that up to your attention as a thing. What we really want to do instead is I want to go through each of these products, and I want to make it so that these form elements, they get submitted when I click on the buttons, but then this text gets updated automatically for me. So that the post happens like through JavaScript, and then that'll cause the page not to be reloaded. So I'm going to show you very briefly how to do that, and then that'll wrap it up for today. So if we just say, all right, so in my implementation, what I have is I have all these products. I'm going to call this class product. And then these buttons here, I'm going to make 2 new buttons actually because class equals up. And this is going to go down. All right, so we go back to this implementation, add this +1 and -1, and we can give these a little bit of a style. That doesn't look so good at all. Okay, so there's kind of like these little buttons here. We'll get a little space between them. All right, so still kind of a little lame looking, but like this will prove our point. All right, so now I got this kind of thing going on here. So when I click on one of these things, I want like that interaction that we used to have to happen. So in order to wire this up in jQuery, I have like these nice classes, vote up and vote down, and I have a class on each of these products. So it's going to be a lot like the rollover item. I can make some new, let me make some more space in this file. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go look for each product. And I'm going to say, so each time that you click on something that's vote up, so let's start with that instead. So every time that you click on something that's vote up, on click, I want to do something. Okay, so if we go to console, I click on one of these things, you'll see vote clicked over and over again, which is pretty cool. So, and then the same thing, I'll do the same thing for vote down. So these guys are vote down, I got vote up, vote down, so forth. So now what I want to do is I want to submit the form instead, because I had that, it used to be I had those little form buttons. It turns out that jQuery has this really cool little thing built in called post. It's a method right on the $sign object, and all it does is it takes a URL. So I can just, if I have a URL, I can send it right in there, and I can show you an example of that right in the browser here. So if I go into here, and I have, if I post to products /1/vote up, what'll happen, so products 1 had 6 votes, now it'll have 7 votes. So now what we didn't see is we didn't have the interaction of having the page change automatically, so we're going to have to handle that ourselves. But that would be the basic idea. So we're going to post to that product's URL. Now, back here in the template, we don't actually have like the voting path anywhere in here. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to use what's called a data attribute, and that'll give me a place where I want to store that information. So this is the kind of thing that there's a special like data attributes specification that's available now in HTML. So you can always just use data something, and it doesn't matter what after the dash what it is. Like you can just come up with whatever you want. So I'm going to say data vote URL, and this is a place where you can store information that's available to you in JavaScript. So here I can say product path for this product. So now if we go back here, we go to view page source. That's actually not how that works in this particular language. I got to use ERB tags. I shouldn't have to escape it. So there's products 10, products 2, products 1. So you see how I'm just getting this data vote URL in here? Yeah. And then what I want to do here is, so I have these vote up and down things. So now the way that this is structured is these buttons, the parent of this is this li tag. So just like how we did in the hover example, we're going to just go up to the parent and we can just get the, we'll get the value of that data, of that path. So I'll say this dot parent. It turns out this, if you call data, you can just pass in an argument and you'll pass in the rest of the attribute that you want. So vote URL. That's a special method on jQuery too. So this will be the URL, and we'll just put this into the console log too so we can see it. I'm not going to do that. See, I clicked on, I guess I'm not printing it for the vote down, so I click on, as I click on these products, I'm getting the different paths in the console, which is cool. Like that's kind of what you want. So now all I want to do is I just want to post to that path, but with the appropriate vote up and vote down instead. Okay, so that's that thing, and then I'm going to put in vote up and vote down. So here, like I'm kind of hard coding a little bit. Oops. Put a syntax error here because. Syntax error here because sure. It's good to me. Alright, so let's debug this one. So this says there's no, oh, because the console log is a comment. That's easy. Alright, so now these little interactions are happening, and you can see them happening in the network tab. Like if I clear the network tab, and I go and I click on these little guys, you see I actually am getting like the these interactions to happen, but the numbers aren't updating. But if I go and refresh it, the numbers are all different because it's definitely happening, but the page isn't updating yet. So what I want to do instead to kind of like complete this little example is rather than redirecting back to the products path, because you're not actually going to navigate anyway, here I can just render some other information. So I'm just going to render text of the product votes. So what I'll get back to now instead is every time that I go and do one of these things, vote up or vote down, you can see this in the, let me zoom in here. If I go and do this guy here, vote up, if you notice this is hard to see. So in this network tab, there's a lot of really good information in here if this is the first time you're seeing this. You can see every single request, and you can also see like all of the interesting information about it. So in this header section, you can see everything that went out and came back in terms of the headers, which includes like your cookies and stuff. And then in this response section, you can see what the actual like response from the server was, the body of the response. So here I'm putting the number of votes that existed. So like these two 5s. These should both be 6 now, yeah, see 6s. So that's the new number of votes. So now what I'll be able to do is go look at the documentation for jQuery post. And you'll notice that the way that this works is that jQuery post, it takes 3 different arguments. It takes a URL, then it takes an optional data, and an optional success method. So if we just go and call it with this calling syntax, we'll be able, this success, the result that comes back from the server will actually be in the success thing. So that's what we're going to do instead. So in order to do that, we have to have the data exist in order to get into this third argument slot. So we're just going to use empty data. This is the callback, and then the success function. See, it takes the first argument is the data that comes back from the server. And I know I'm kind of rushing this example here, but I wanted to show you guys kind of like how these pieces go together, and then this will give you a chance to kind of like experiment with this a little bit on your own. So at this point, where we are is we're in the. I put a debugger inside of this post. So what you should see, what I should see is, you notice I have a function that represents success. It takes votes, and then if I go to votes here, I actually have the number, the new number 12. So that's cool. So that's what I want to actually replace the text with. So back in my template, I'm just going to take this little piece here. I'm going to give this a class, call it votes. And then all that's going to happen is I'm going to say jQuery. Okay, we'll just save this. Product.find votes, and I'll set the HTML to be the number of votes that I got back. And then just, I need the same, I actually do the same thing in both cases, so I'll just copy it. Sorry if that's getting truncated. Okay, that'll do that, and this one is the unclick. So that should complete the example, and now you can see I don't lose my state in the page, especially if I'm like scrolled down. I'm just getting the number back from the server, but if I do refresh the page, everything is more or less, I guess I didn't get that from before, so that 5 changed. But yeah, so that's going up and down through 10, 9, all those different numbers, and I'm not losing my state in the page. Another thing that's kind of weird is that it's selecting all kinds of stuff because I chose a span here instead of an A tag. I could just change that to an A tag, and then my life will probably be easier. So let me just do that real quick. Only thing that's a little weird is I'll have to restyle that, but I guess I'm still selecting it, so that would be something I'd want to fix with CSS. So that is kind of an interesting day of jQuery. It's definitely some of the pieces that you can do. I'll take some of the most important parts of that and put that in a gist, and I'll send that to you guys in Slack so you can see kind of what's going on there. And maybe what we'll do is I'll kind of turn this back into like a real lecture so that we can go back over it in more detail. I know that we had to rush through some parts there. So yeah, definitely. That's a good idea. I have the recording. I made the whole thing, so I already recorded the whole thing. So yeah, we'll post the recording too. Do you guys have any kind of like general questions, or like? We didn't, or anything specifically that you wanted to, like, just talk about for the last, like, little bit of class here. Like, how did you guys think, could you guys follow that stuff at all? I don't actually have a sense. The jQuery stuff. Yeah. This is great. Yeah, so I mean, there's a lot to reading the documentation. You know, like there's like these jQuery docs, especially like a library that says like sophisticated as jQuery or Rails. Like Rails is a framework, jQuery is a library. But yeah, these docs have a lot of information in them. Like these examples can get you a lot of the way to success. Like if you look at this, even like this post here, like this is pretty much exactly what we just did. Is you post to a location, and then you get a success callback. What this I think looks like actually from this example, I would say you don't even necessarily. I learned a little something. Like you don't even need this this empty data hash here.
So the success callback just generates the HTML.
Yeah, that you want to. So yeah, so you want it. Whatever you can do whatever you want in the success callback. So in the case of this application, what I wanted to do is I wanted to update this number of votes, but you could, it's totally up to you. That's an opportunity for you to do whatever interaction you want. Just fill it out. So that's kind of how that's going to go down. So that's your opportunity to do that. And that's kind of how the reason you have to use a callback there is because it doesn't seem like it here locally, but every one of those requests does take finite time. So, like, you don't want to block the whole thread. You saw, like, that request does take, like, I mean, it's only 15 milliseconds. So it doesn't seem like very much while you're running locally, but once you get on the server, like there is like network time, and if you're on a mobile device or something. So it's a callback because things can happen, and callbacks are a way that JavaScript enables you to handle multiple things at once, essentially, without having to wait around. Cool. What are you guys gonna work on hackathon? Joe, do you have any ideas? Wompity womp womp. Instead of wompity womp womp. Oh, womp womp, like womp 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 womp. Womp 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 womp. Yeah, wompity womp womp. You said you were working on some graph viz stuff. Do you have an idea, Rafi? This kind of stuff? Cool. Yeah, good luck with the rail stuff, guys. The no history chat thing. Yeah, so like back on that whole idea of like eventing stuff. Like I would definitely look at Pusher here. Like, this is a totally good library, and there's already like essentially like a chatty kind of idea that is very basic, like very like it's like built right into here. So this would definitely be a good look for like the no history chat, and it'll be the same kind of eventing. So like when you get a message, it'll be like an on, and then you'll have a function, and then you'll need to handle it. Like that's gonna be all JavaScript too. Yeah, that just sits in between. It's like cool. Does anybody want to try? You guys want to try to like get that example? You guys probably weren't able to follow on. Do you want to try to get this example going before we finish up class? Like I can kind of walk around and I can put like this screen's kind of up here. The vote up and down stuff I think is pretty basic Rails, minus this whole like render text at the end here. So if you wanted to, I can put this up on the screen in a foregrid, and I can kind of like walk around and chill with you guys while you try to get it going. If that made sense. Sound good? Alright, cool. So this is kind of like what I want with. And sorry? So what we're talking about? The routes file, yeah, I'll do that too. Okay. I'll put this into this location. Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Let's take a quick look at that. Yeah, right. Well, that's okay. So like that's what they're agreeing, right? When you log in, it's gonna send you somewhere, and that's just based on the way. So like this is a good thing to check in. So this request from the form, that's like the login center. And then here's your response. So this is gonna send you somewhere, so it's presenting products because that's like the way that you can so that's okay. That's no problem. I'd say the thing that so and then what's happening in products is that it's redirecting back to add your login because it's typically not going to be admin products. So I'd say what might be happening, I've been wondering, like, are you actually saving yourself login?
It's going to
Oh, this would be
Go ahead. So there you are. So you set in the session ID. So you're hitting this invite on Friday, so you're setting up the session. And let's see, that's this is your login. Alright, so now what you're going to do is you're going to product and there's
it sounds like
require login.
if we're doing defaults, it really should be part of the model.
And it says login. And see, this is
So I
training
said
login.
you made a method default values, and
Oh, so that.
it's 0
Yeah.
before I save.
So yeah, this is one of these things you just have to walk backwards. So like, in product
So
controller,
when I
product
save
controller, so I went in here first, and that's is there a before filter
Yeah.
that says if you're logged in? There's not one on this controller, but is there one on its base class? But I went to base controller and I said, okay, this before I require login. So now, where is this? Well, not find this file.
Yeah.
Let's find
Do you
this file.
do you rate?
Now,
Okay.
here is,
Tell us what's happening.
wow. Here is require login. Require login says, are you logged in? If not, redirect to login. So here you are logged in, you have been logged in. Oh, you want to do is just check user ID.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And I have another question. So the second, well, one of the other stuff from last night was adding the verification into the
Yeah.
that provide the version of
I would do it that way. You don't have, yeah, so you're not using Devise, you're using, you're like blowing your own up there.
Because it doesn't recognize
So
this.
verifying there, doing the verification email, like, you have a mail that's set up for your customer, and you want to verify your account, right? So you're just gonna create it, just like how we did with the vote up, vote down. You're gonna create a custom action on your, like, either your customer's resource or something that says verify. And you're just gonna go post that action. That's basically that. So I think about it as like, so we should kind of like this is there's like you should be able to find like some blog posts and stuff on that. So like the general workflow is you get an email, and that email that says verify.
So now it's that long.
That button goes and takes you into a path like
That's a migration.
users, your ID,
The date it was made.
and then it has some sort of special token. The token is just like something, right? Something like a scrolly thing. That's going to take you then to an action on your controller.
Not long
Called verify.
It'll throw an error.
And inside of this body of this method, what you're going to do is you're going to say, is the token okay? So you can do it without the token. But the problem in this meeting, if you have no token, then anybody can verify anybody's email by having it. So this token is has to be something special. And that's where we use that active model as a verifier. That's the thing that makes it in this slide.
That one was one thing that I saw that one was really good for their one that had a different one to use. And when I had issues getting that.
So you're on the form?
Well, I think we're all using.
I know, it's a lot of like.
Yeah.
I have mine. Okay.
Yeah, so you should be fine with that. So you're just like, it's pretty much enough. This is sensitive data. It actually really doesn't matter what you put in there. So I'll show you this to the email. And then you can necessarily need this part here. But you can also say like, is this ID match for one of the two? So all of those the same way here. It's just like, if these match, then you're good. That's your class. If they don't, then you all have to leave. So what do you want to check for everybody? If this is my user table, you don't want to use some columns like this when they verify it's a default default. Otherwise,
Yeah, I will verify it at
so that's the kind of it. Create a button in email, it has this tag, and then the controller has an action, and this would be a get action because it's not like you guys can get, even though you are in the states.
Thank you. Yep, thank you so much.
No problem.
Right, I wanted to show you the refactor code. I wanted to ask you if it looked better.
BigQuery's, that's what I meant. Yeah.
I know we're
Buttons.
probably in super code, but
This button,
I haven't been code right all day. It's a
yeah,
little
this
slow.
they didn't actually do anything wrong, right? They just didn't look at button. So So they're meant to be easy to do it inside of the form, which is the way that we also do it, which we button too, or with job terms. So you can actually wire those buttons the same way I wire the button. In fact, that button is probably the most better choice. I use it to spam. If I went back and what was the back over front of my computer, but when I use the button, but then in order to target those with jQuery, you're going to add classes and stuff.
Alright, so I'll do a time block. But first I need to find a time block. So I say current user.time block, defined by start time. Time block params start block. Start time. Remember params has this hash of things, and I'm just finding by start time. And I'm saying if the time block, if inside the params it says to add to the time block, if it says that's true, then what I first need to do is check if the time block exists, and then I need to say if it doesn't exist, I need to create the
This
time
stuff,
block.
so like
And then I add the event to
little
it.
talk thing. So like it's like the
And
or whatever. It depends like how your stuff's set up.
then,
So, like,
okay, so
you
now,
go back here and
if this piece of code initializes this piece of code,
so here you've got
because
code up.
if we're
Out
adding
here
an event to the time block,
this div.
happens.
So see that's cool. I can pull it out. See the parent that things you put. So it's kind of like the HTML parent. It's not cool.
That way because the file.
Well, I mean, it's just a div, right? So I mean, like, it's not really a product.
It's
It's like a
saying,
product.
okay,
But
so
it's kind of like the div that contains
that
it.
just
So
means that at time
that's kind of like, it just ends up being the, that ends up being a good
So
term because you
now
usually have
it's
like,
saying-
people like,
it's removing the event.
you have a bunch of
from
these
the
sources. So like the parent of whatever, of some element of it is usually the post itself. So I think that's a good place to like store
That's a good question.
information.
You can actually read about this function here, remove event from
That both around.
So first I pass it to block that the event's on. And then, okay, so block dot events from current user. What this does is it says,
So then
look at the
that
block.
product, say this is the same thing.
Get the events
Here's
that
where
are
it's
added by
hanging on
user.
in that situation.
Right. Well, now this is just Ruby. This is the Ruby library of
Right. That makes sense.
the current user of the. Okay, so then I need to say dot remove.
So like,
And then I
do
say
this,
time
then you
block
post it.
params.
And the reason it's such a
Once again, that's our parameters. And when I pass the JSON to me as the parameters,
Still a reference this product.
I put the event that I want to remove or that I want to add this.
So what
I
I'll do
can actually
is
see it.
change this, it's an HTML.
Yeah, that's the event section. So you see it inside the hash. I can actually show it to you.
That's we have to implement the controller.
Do a line without line.
You're setting it back to the
Time
controller
block
and
params
then
and terms. This
you're
JSON
gonna then it'll go ahead with all the examples. So now that would that's a
And
This just.
that's just like everything's good here.
what is the first page? You just
And
give you feature.
I could
So if you were to like,
potentially say,
if you switch those routes back to get, all you then you put
Just
this
say
one
something.
of those go routes. You just get a like literally just a number.
no, we'll show her.
Or whatever the number is. So you're just taking advantage of here in order to
On the top.
in order to get the number back from the server. You don't need the whole page. You just want one number.
Whatever. Because remember, when you're passing information back and forth, you need to give it a status code for whatever this kind of thing to do. In this case, it is. So I just say, oh, I'm going to everything's good.
Yeah, that's one of the there's a little announcements. Wow. What did you do, Joe? Walk me through here a little. Crazy.
But basically, okay is just okay, and then the status code.
It's definitely.
So the actual message that I get to go out
supposed to be
flash notice, I could just.
Yeah, you go.
But I could go flash.
Yeah, there you go.
Flash
That's
message.
good. Yeah,
Just this is just the HTML language which I got. So this not important, it's just noting that this is just something way to see.
Yeah, the latest. Yeah, I feel like voting is one of those things where everyone
Alright, so now,
that's what
in the out state, say,
Yeah, so this would be totally
time block. And time block, out state, time block.
Ask me a question. So
The
what
reason we
do you
need
think
this
for
is because we need to store time back and block back in the database. Then we need to reload it to see the updated time block with all the events in it. And then we say, okay, so all the events on this time block to echo at this user, is it empty? If it is empty, we do time block out. So it just gets rid of the time block.
So the add to
You can see the definition for add events to here is just shut it goes through all the steps for adding events to a time block.
Probably a real
Then remove nonsense, all the steps were you see, like it automatically does it because explicitly here I say block.save. So basically taking all that spaghetti code and putting it into these functions so that inside the block looks more like English.
I mean, you definitely say that. That's true, but it's just kind of weird. It's kind of a weird situation.
The next step is I need to spec it out so I can write tests and values and then I need to
It's not necessarily wrong. It's like it's probably not how you really think about it. Like, you entry it in user
fix them.
You call it as
Because
like,
we
have,
have
if you it's a user that users that voted for it. We kind of like, okay, this is
it's fine. If you feel those like talking, you know they order it. It's just you don't know if it's better. I mean,
was that validated.
or I don't know if it's cheap or size or something like that. For instance, maybe it's too large. I don't know.
Oh, you vote. Okay,
It's going to come down to the test today. But that's sort of. This isn't like. I don't really work like this. I usually go test first and then add the functions. But I was working with something that I'd already done before, so I just started hacking away at it. Figuring it out.
You don't have any entries that make sense. So you can create entries. No, I would say back to your users, back to your entries connected. It's entries along.
It's just nice to have something clear to be able to test and get it. One day, time block will
Each
have
entry is going to be close to the user.
It's like you'll need one test for it. If it's happening a lot,
I'm not sure about that. I think that it's probably user has a piece of code. Users will go to make on anyone else. Then you'll have to develop it yourself.
Exactly. And if then, while it's empty, if he's adding an event, if he's removing an event when it's empty afterwards, and he's removing an event with other blocks being
And then those are going to want the users too. I think we already have.
as an asshole, so this function works here. For uploading or downloading or
So I think that would be actually good.
so I'm going to start it on the front end. We need to do that. See what's going on. I don't know if that's the approach for that is because if so many blocks, like I'm starting to think that they should start at 8 a.m. or something and not go down there because it's more practical.
Alright, so you're interested in the user ID and so
How about we have an option for like when you're going to start?
yeah, I think so. Like, it's not just good kind of but I think
I think it's
also like you've got users and you've got entries like those are good, right? So the way you should draw this is within the layer. I mean, that's not really you have any. You just have I think votes are really entries probably like a one sample, so like a vote, a single vote.
Another thing that I realized it shows it's a problem.
I think on vote you always have an entry.
And it'll be easier to
You and on the vote also have user has many votes. It also will have a user ID.
So,
Yeah. But then an entry, it wouldn't necessarily have a, it would have a user ID as well. That would be the user that created the entry, right? But it wouldn't have a vote ID. That's going to be captured. That's going to capture it separately. He doesn't really change that, but you will. But if you want to comment on that for now, and I think it makes sense since entries have many, has or at least has one or has many password rules. I think that that's also that's going to point back. So password rule have an entry. So that. And so then I think this should point back to an entry, and that would indicate that this thing can only be it has to belong to a particular entry. That would be like that. So what you could do is maybe make a little arrow and say, you could make a common arrow. Yeah. Yeah, sure. Users look good, and then votes I think is the last one. That's the one you're gonna want to make sure with link. You want users are gonna cast votes, right?
so this is the type.
And
This
you're
is
gonna
the
count toward
one.
a particular entry. So that's really
We're gonna put in.
those two columns are you're gonna want that. Yeah, entry ID and user.
That's correct. That's correct. But reload it. Okay, put in something that's like that too. Now we do it. And something. Figure out the updated version. Let me see if. So, you go back in here.
No, so you don't have to. The ones do has one password. Sometimes it's really tricky. I think it's good. Like I just trying to draw it out. Like if you use the notation that is common standard diagramming is like a single means has one, and then this has many. And it seems like the directionality is kind of weird to go. So if you drew this up a different way, maybe you said okay. Entries belong to user. I feel like it's if you draw it wrong, so it just sort of seems right. So maybe this is more okay. Do votes have any users? No, votes don't have any users. Like you're not gonna have a single vote doesn't have any users. And like does an entry so like you have to have an entry. Like the nice thing is that like it's like it sort of shows you where your stuff starts. So if you start with a user, and it lets you create entries. So like, what do you need first? Like, you need entry first, or you need user first? You need user first.
It's just a lot.
Oh, okay. Like what's that? Alright. So then, like, do they have one or many? Oh, they have many. And then that helps you, that helps you figure it out. So like, this is gonna be let's say the user has many, it goes this way, and then when it goes the opposite way, one goes two. So that's kind of your basic diagram. So then what you want to do is just write migrations. It's actually not that big of a deal to change these constitutional drop the whole field and back. Or delete. Yeah, so that means it's not the migration. Alright guys, 9 o'clock, so head out if you want to stick around and ask more questions. I'll do a lot of deliveries and special directions.
So here's what we do.
Configuration, stay. Fix. Yeah, that's fine. Oh, it's work. We'll often work. And then you just go here.
I want to see how much.
That's what makes it sad.
Alright, that's CSS stuff. That's more of your thing. So this one we're mastering.
Yeah, I don't think about this button, so I got grayed out up down over here. You know, and it can only be very visible when you hover, so it keeps it blurred.
Well, you can make it.
You would really just, you could make the box a bit bigger, but really you would be like, and so you would select it as has, and just make it a space over there. It's like, it just looks like it's actually there, so it looks like it was deep, like this thing, but it really isn't. But that's cool.
And then it's what you should be able to do is in your model. So you have to check your picture guys here. You can run times like your picture would be set.
Oh, yeah, that's like that.
I'm trying to go through the voting right now. So,
Yeah, I think
Or
that's
gonna-
Just check the pictures, make sure that they're.
Okay, it looks like it's working fine.
So this might be.
I don't know why it wasn't like that, but I think I can isolate it. So I can make the what
Either keep it.
What was it Baltimore? No, we do like that. Oh,
No, but later on, we actually have.
so, sorry.
I'm fine with that's one for exercises like great. Is it because that area will get set to a ton and then never actually makes sense? I mean, I was able to. So once again,
How'd you guys do? That's pretty good. Smart thought. You look real. You're both cleaned up. Seriously. My camera. That's awesome. It's not already said.
How do you think we should, I think this is promoting features of your templates.
I think you should. I totally think you should. So I mean, you've got that. You guys built that. You template those blocks, right? So I mean, you should use those data attributes, just like that. You know, the same way we did it. Like I do this. I do it the same way. Like start with it. Start as a Rails thing. Like use button 2. So like those. What are the 3 steps? It was like create the actions, add it to the routes file, and then use button 2 so that actually things will happen. So you can move things up and down. And then once you got that going, then you can go try jQuery stuff. jQuery stuff is obviously, it's just completely different than the rest of it's a whole language, it's a different like mechanism. But like it's like possible because you see like it's only really like what fits in that one little query string. It's not that complicated, but it's just very different. So, but I think if you start with the stuff that you know well, like the like creating those custom actions and getting the routing set up for them and using the Rails helpers like button 2, then
I see the problem.
yeah.
That's the,
Let me just do some more.
I don't think so. This should actually just do it. It's a local variable that only gets initiated once the function's called. So if I just get rid of this add, then it should actually just straight fix it. Okay, so once again, remember this. Well, fix the magnets. So bar doesn't save.
Alright.
so how did it end?
Yeah, okay. Yeah. That looks good. That looks way better than mine.
Blackness, that's,
Action vote up could have been found in product control.
Um,
Sounds like a problem to me. So you get the routes. That's a good start.
lots of floor.
Oh no, what's your problem? I think you've got them inside of a private block, right? Like, is that. See the thing sitting on 6 feet? I think you're into that modifier. Can you use private like that with it? I never do this. I think we might be able to.
We should.
I was moving off honestly, just to kind of be on the safe side. Not be inside that private one. Okay, then. So this is a better start.
This is really
And
fun.
then it says, okay, so, and then the other thing, I think you're making get instead of post. So if you notice, you can always tell get it's going to be the URL. Go back to your route spot for a second. Close photo. It's really good. Did you render that as button 2? Back in your index to that?
So I have the project on my admin folder as well as my.
Oh, look at this dude. Yeah, this guy. Okay, so this is, these aren't even in your class. That's the end of 5. That's the end of the class. It's okay. Everybody does that. I saw he did that too. And that's why the indentation comes. So make sure you indent them. And then you go, yeah, that makes sense. So then back in your other part, that other parts controller, that one you don't actually need. Just leave those. That's what it is. So that's now you're in the right place. Okay, cool. And now you're just getting this template, which means you just need to redirect back if you want to do that. So that's the happen. Don't worry about that. So in your other guy, there you just want to redirect back after you save one time. So just redirect back to products path. Underscore products. Because all of that, it's the index is products for. You should see it over there. Cool. Alright, what's the products? So where were you? You were in the admin's products path? Is that where? Go back to. Right, no, go to the browser.
Yeah, I wasn't.
Oh, you're in admin. And so, okay, so you're posting to, so you're, okay, so you had, I guess, so I might have steered you wrong there. So if you wanted to vote in admin, then you were totally right to have those methods be in the admin. It's a little confusing just because you got two different namespaces. So if you want to have those methods be in the admin products path, then that's no problem. Just move them back in there.
So like.
But then the route spot, I think, maybe set up incorrect.
Because I put it outside of that.
Yeah. You probably just want to, it just depends, it's totally up to you, but however you want to design it. So if you want to be able to vote in the admin namespace, then you'd want to,
Because I kind of don't have like a regular name. Like,
which everything else is the regular namespace. So like in my like with a pretend example, like in mine, like I was imagining like the front end users could vote on products, and the admin users like they could probably change it. You know, I might expose, for example, like this is an app for real. I might expose the number of votes as like a field that you can just like put in a number if you want to. If you set up. But you're totally fine. Just move. Don't move the whole thing because you still want to. You have a list of products, so just move like the block like they do.
That's just a problem.
Yeah.
It's a problem.
You got it right. I mean, it's just I think that because you guys have like both things. So like, the way that what I was sort of thinking that you guys would do is you'd have like your admin namespace, and then you have like. You pick a new, like what you've done, you like create a new front end controller and have the vote up and down be on that.
yeah, I do some
Fix it.
development for like.
Yeah,
This is development on that.
yeah, we're gonna go do that. We're gonna do that on Monday, I think. So I'm gonna like make some exercises that we can go through, and have and do like that like an actual. I think what we'll do is we'll do a list of products and we'll do a shopping cart and we'll do checkout. Like it sounds like that would be a lot, but it actually is. Sure does.
Keep trying to run the Rails.
Rails.
So it throws an error because I have to set an exact value right now. And it throws an error. So
Yeah, it's not that. It's member.
Yeah.
yeah, I think so. So it actually knows what was the word?
It was because.
Member's part of it's like DSL. Like it's part of it's like member and collection are the two other ones. So there's like get post, like there's, I mean you can use any one. It's just like when you're inside a draw, it exposes like a new set of methods to you. And like one of those methods is member.
Okay.
So what's called like a domain-specific language. So like it's not really a special language. It's just like a bunch of Ruby methods that like sort of look like a different language the way that you use them. But I think it can be confusing too because like you're like, wait a minute, what is that? Like, it's not that. It's not.
Is there anything else you can see?
Yeah, you just do it. Yeah,
That's
that's that. Let me run right
So
now.
what I was doing is storing a flash notice on time block, and then the flash notice was cascading down
You can short break now for your
everything. It could work, but yeah, it's just.
But if you go back to the stack
Yeah,
trace,
gotta be
like,
explicit about your choice.
so I mean, like without, like I just saw it over the
It's
course.
the lesson.
This is trying to say, I mean, it just says undefined user until like, that's these stack traces are so intimidating because it's like 8 bajillion lines. I mean, it's the only one you ever need to the first line. Like you just go back to the top.
Yeah, I was like reading down through.
Like that never makes sense. The other thing you should do is, anytime, as soon as you see this name for region
That's
outside,
like that.
you never subscribe to that, because that's not you. So like, this is what you skip this. In fact, if you see this in a
So,
rack,
in this
you don't even
case,
see this
what
now, but
they're
they're like,
doing is
you
they're
can make it
calling
happen.
multiple methods on one single element.
See, it says application trace, framework trace, full trace. So application trace, this is your part, this is your part that you control. And then framework, this is everything else. This is the stuff that you can't control. So like, it's probably not your fault. So that's why they hide it. So they say, oh,
It
there's
looks like
your
what they're
trace.
doing is they're just calling it.
So if you look in the console, anything that has all this Ruby versions, all this shit, you just ignore it. So it's just like it's only things that have your own. Okay, you control this. You don't control any of that stuff. You control this. You control this. And you control that part.
So confusion, but it makes sense now.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you want the whole stack trace. It's just like one of those things you just have to learn. It's like, oh, well, I don't have to worry about that part because that's somebody else. And that's above Rails than like record with Rails, but probably not honestly. So, Hank, you got any closing questions, bro? You got it all figured out? Just killing it. All right, cool. So like, I tried something new today. I'm not sure that obviously worked that well. I want to have like more like a free form class, like where you guys can like kind of do stuff we want to work on. But I'm gonna try to like sway us back towards like having more organization. So we'll see how it goes next time. We'll try
I mean,
something
like,
else.
I don't mind just like, working in classes.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking. I was like, oh, maybe we'll just hack on stuff. But like, I feel like I'm not sure what the best mechanism to like sort of do that is.
I feel like, if you have something you're working on, then I think it works.
Yeah.
I think it's like, I feel like a lot of learning is just figuring out problems as you go.
Yeah, definitely. And I kind of think that like sometimes like that I know that example with that tooltip thing like that's kind of dumb, but like that's honestly kind of how programming works. You're like, oh, I just want to do this thing. You go Google it, you find something, and you're like, all right, well, is this gonna work? And then you like put it in your vendor file, and you're like, well, this doesn't work for some reason. You're like, why is this broken? So like then you like pull up inspect element and like figure it out. Like that's kind of how it goes.
Yeah, when I work with a new library, that's something I've worked with before. My code ends up looking really hacky compared to it at first, but after a while, once I get used to it, I start,
Explains up, yeah. There you go.
refactoring it and just
So,
have an understanding of what it's doing.
all right, stop recording.